Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and all you squirrels. I hope that everybody's doing wonderful tonight, and let's see if we can get some of this done. We'll give it a try. I'm going to run through this trial just a little bit quicker than I normally would, 1.75, because, you know, what is the point of watching it in real time? Yeah. Was I working? Oh, yes, dear. I was working. I was working up until the point that I had to get up and make dinner. I actually didn't even get my exercise this morning because I went and got work done on my teeth. So I'm not really talking properly. It feels like it. But I worked, and now I'm streaming. I would have gone over on Cool Frogs, but I don't want to be up until the wee hours of the morning trying to finish this day out. So it's really good seeing you. Glad that you're here. Welcome, 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 everybody. And let's get to this. Oh, yeah. Yes. It is about 7:15 here at night. Let's see how all this works out. I want to say that this boy is still guilty as all get out, but state hasn't completely proven their case. That's what I'm waiting on.
All rise for the jury.
Boom, bottom, 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 bum, 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 bottom. There we go.
All right, we're going to go on a record. It is January 24th, 2023. We're on a case of State of Wisconsin versus Mark B. Jensen, 2002 CF 314. So have the appearances, please.
Good morning, Your Honor. State of Wisconsin appears by Special Prosecutor Robert Jamboys, Deputy District Attorney Carly McNeil, and Public Service Special Prosecutor Beverly Jamboys.
Attorneys Bridget Krause, Jeremy Perry, and Mackenzie Renner appear on behalf of Mr. Mark Jensen, who appears in person. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning. The jury's back in the courtroom. Thank you for coming on time, folks. We're still in the state's case in chief with that. Who's your next witness, Mr. Jamboys?
Dr. Mary Mainland.
Right, let's have her come up.
Judge, before Dr. Mainland starts testifying, and I mentioned this at the end of yesterday, I do want to mark exhibits 80 and 81. They're the transcripts that correspond to the telephone calls that were played for defense exhibit 72, and I'd like to admit those and offer those in evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, 80 and 81 are received. Doctor, raise your right hand. I'll swear again. You solemnly swear the testimony is to be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, nothing but God. Thank you. Get as close as you can to the microphone. And if you could spell your first and last name for the reporter.
First name Mary, M-A-R-Y. Last name Mainland, M-A-I-N-L-A-N-D.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Jamboys.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Mainland. Could you please tell the jury how you're presently employed?
I'm retired.
When did you get retired?
November of 2020.
When you retired, what were you doing?
I was, well, I still am, but I was serving as a medical examiner for Hillsborough County in Tampa, Florida. So by profession, I'm a forensic pathologist.
Okay.
Exhibit S82.
Yes, sir.
What is Exhibit S82?
This is a copy of my curriculum vitae, also known as a resume.
And How current is this curriculum vitae?
I think I updated it in October of last year.
So any changes since October of last year?
No.
So can you first of all tell the jury about your education?
Sure. Starting with college, I received my
Okay,
bachelor's degree
don't
from the
care about
University
her
of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
education. I really don't.
Went to medical school in Milwaukee. I wanted the next person in line to be.
First hearing, which she testified, I think it doesn't have to have this.
Two laboratories that determined that there was ethylene glycol in Julie Jensen's system. The first one was the St. Louis University Toxicology Laboratory, and after that, other laboratories became involved, including the Wisconsin State Lab of Hygiene, National Medical Services, University of Kentucky, and even a couple more.
Okay, just you want to make counsel approach for just a moment? Sure.
Right, folks?
Yeah.
Just want to talk about the case.
See, that was easy. I can speed through this stuff so quick. Hey, Daisy girl, how you doing? Good to see you.
The jury's outside the courtroom. The
Yeah,
issue
I
that
just-
see in the attorney's
I just
fees,
went
she's
through
giving
about
documents
45
to-
minutes in less than
That's not the
30
issue,
seconds.
That's
I
not
love
the
it.
issue, but you don't have a problem with that?
I do, unless there's an indication that she needs that to refresh her memory.
Well, she just indicated that would be helpful for her to be able to do that. Let's take up this issue first that Mr. Perry brought to my attention. That's the reason I asked for the sidebar, and then we'll take up that second issue. Okay. The first issue is that as I was doing my direct examination of Dr. Mainland, Mr. Perry came over and he said that he would prefer that I not refer to the first hearing as the forfeiture hearing, and I not refer to the second hearing as the trial. I understand his concerns about the second part. I mean, referring to it as a trial, but I didn't do that. The witness did. I guess I didn't tell her not to, but I could tell her she maybe should refer to it as a second hearing. I don't see a problem with referring to the first hearing as the forfeiture hearing. So I didn't.
You think the jury knows what a forfeiture hearing is?
I don't know, but I think it's also very easy, since it has a title in it, to refer to it as the 2007 hearing or the first hearing at which she testified. I think it doesn't have to have this label on it because it does. I don't know what everyone's understanding of it, but forfeiture, I mean, people do understand that word. I don't know if they understand the legal.
What if we would have said preliminary hearing?
That's fine.
Well, except
All
that would be-
preliminary hearing.
That would be incorrect because it wasn't a preliminary hearing.
Not
Well, I'm just saying as an example.
Sure, I understand.
I mean, I don't think 9 out of 10 people in this courtroom know what a forfeiture hearing was. It was so unique at that. I think it was the first one.
Well, it was the first.
It was the first one in the state of Wisconsin when it was held.
It's my request. If it's I don't know that it's such a difficult request to avoid putting the title on what these earlier hearings were, especially considering we're really trying to avoid discussion about first trial, prosecution, all that stuff, and just refer to it as earlier testimony and
Well,
debates.
Mr. Jambos, just say first hearing, second hearing.
Your Honor, I will do that. And so will Dr. Mainland. I will say this about the forfeiture hearing. That's what I've been referring to it as for 15 years. So it's hard. I will make this is the second or third time I've referred to it as a forfeiture hearing in the course of this trial, and I have to acknowledge that Mr. Perry has asked me in each of the previous times not to refer to it as a forfeiture hearing. It's just it's not like I'm intentionally trying to upset Mr. Perry.
He is.
Maybe we could have Ms. McNeil kick you in your shins.
Oh, yeah, he is.
Just say that.
She'd be anxiously happy to do that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's hard to.
My wife from behind too, but I will try to refer to it as the first hearing and the second hearing, and I'd ask Dr. Mainland to do the same thing.
It's hard.
What's the second issue?
Well, then you'd propose that it's a problem with her using these documents, and she'd indicated that it would be helpful to her in the course of her testimony to review the documents that she brought with her. And let's remember, we had this discussion about what the proponent of an expert witness, what they can get in as far as hearsay, and which is really we can't. I mean, when I'm as the proponent of the expert testimony of Dr. Mainland, I can't seek to admit hearsay evidence through her. The defense can on cross, but
You'll
I can't
try.
on direct. And I think we all recognize that
You will
at some
try.
previous hearing in this matter. And of course, that's what the law of the land is in the state of Wisconsin. So some of these prior reports there's been testimony and it's been admitted evidence. The reports that Joe Crafasi prepared at the St. Louis Forensic Toxicology Lab, that's been admitted in evidence. And so she could testify about that and it wouldn't be a problem. The State Lab of Hygiene test report has not been received in evidence, nor has the NMS report been received in evidence. So I'm going to ask her about those reports, but I'm not going to offer them into evidence. And it's common for a forensic pathologist, of course, to rely upon forensic toxicology reports that from outside laboratories. It's done all the time. And in the state of Wisconsin, a forensic pathologist can testify at a trial about the cause and manner of death based upon outside forensic toxicology lab reports because there's a Wisconsin Supreme Court decision that says so. I forgot what that is. I'm sure Ms. McNeil is probably looking it up as I'm speaking, but there is a Wisconsin Supreme Court case that expressly says that forensic pathologists can testify about lab reports, or at least base their opinions upon lab reports.
The only issue I had, and if she's looking at reports that she brought, I don't know if the defense has an opportunity to know what she's looking at.
Well, I'd be happy to have Dr. Mainland.
I'm just trying to do a record because obviously we're on Jensen 3.
Yes.
And the lawyers understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
So if she's looking at something and then it's not part of the record.
I'd like a brief opportunity to see what she has with her.
All right.
I don't have a problem with her testifying, with the exception of course, testimonial things that we've talked about.
And that goes for your witnesses, experts too. So
That's right. And our expert witnesses, I expect, are going to the same standard being applied to talk about the things that they reviewed to come to their conclusions. So that's fine, but I would ask for a short time to look at what.
Want to do it right now?
Dr. Mainland has. Yeah.
Well, and just I will say this on the record in the presence of the witness, Dr. Mainland, I don't want you to mention the letter that Julie Jensen wrote a week and a half before she died. You're not supposed to mention that. Even if it entered into your analysis of this case, I don't want you to reference it.
I'm aware of that.
And so if I ask you a question, it seems like I'm asking you about that. I'm not asking you about that. Okay.
Got it.
Thank you.
And I won't be asking about that either.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, that includes voicemails that were left for Officer Cosman. That's,
Oh,
that's
okay.
part of it all.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, why don't you take a look at what she has?
Setting the rules, setting the rules.
I just made myself kind of.
All right. I don't need to sit there and watch them do this.
Judge, right?
Hey, Rabbit. Good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Already.
I think we're waiting on the jury. Let's see what we got. Yep.
All rise for the jury.
All right, we're back on the record on Mark D. Jensen, 2002 CF314. The appearances are the same. The jury's back in the courtroom. Thank you for your patience this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Malin is still on the stand. She's still under oath, and you can continue, Mr. Jambois.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just to get us all oriented, I was asking you about the quantum and the nature of the information that you had available to you in advance of your testimony at the first hearing. So to that end, I was asking you about the toxicological results that you reviewed. So can you tell the jury about the toxicological reports that you reviewed in preparation for making a determination as to cause and manner of death in this case?
But before the first hearing, I saw toxicological results from the St. Louis University laboratory.
The St. Louis Forensic Toxicology Laboratory?
Yes.
And what was the blood test result that was provided with regard to ethylene glycol?
There was ethylene glycol in the blood. And do you want the quantity?
Yes.
At 50 micrograms per milliliter.
And then there's another one listing here, GCFD, 55 micrograms per milliliter. What's that about?
Oh, that was the, I'm sorry. See, I confused the two already. The other one came later. The GCFID was the first specimen that was analyzed, and that came back at 55 micrograms per milliliter.
And what does GCFID mean?
It has to do with the instrument and the method of analysis for these drugs. They put them through an instrument called a gas chromatograph. And what it does is it separates different drugs and different ion parts of drugs out. And then there's a thing, FID is called a flame ionization detector, and that will tell you what you have. Don't ask me any more detail, please.
But that's something that you routinely rely upon as a forensic pathologist.
Yes.
But you're not a lab rat. You don't do that kind of stuff.
No, I don't.
Okay. But then there was another test that was done later, and that refers to GCMS, and it's 50 micrograms per milliliter. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what's GCMS stand for?
Again, they use the same machine, a gas chromatograph, but the method of analysis of detection is mass spectroscopy.
Now, so that's pretty close, though. I mean, 55 milligrams per milliliter versus 50 micrograms per milliliter, correct?
Yes.
But, there'd also been a test at National Medical Services, and they indicated what?
They,
The blood.
they indicated that the blood was negative for ethylene glycol.
And they'd also tested the urine. An NMS had also tested for urine, correct?
Yes.
And they tested for ethylene glycol.
Yes.
And they came back what?
They came back negative.
Now, NMS was the first set of tests that were done at the request of the Kenosha County Medical Examiner's Office. Is that true?
As far as I understand, yes.
But then at a later time, those samples were submitted to the St. Louis Forensic Toxicology Lab. Is that what you're finding? Is that what you discovered when you looked through these reports?
Correct.
And you know why the medical examiner sent these items out to have them tested at a different laboratory?
The medical examiner found some microscopic findings, particularly in the kidney tissue, that were very worrisome for ethylene glycol poisoning. And so that's why another lab was used.
So then the reports were sent to the St. Louis Forensic Toxicology Lab. You've described the blood test results. What did the St. Louis Forensic Toxicology Lab find about the urine content?
The first test came back at 720 micrograms per milliliter. And then the second test with the GCMS came back at 549 micrograms per milliliter.
But National Medical Services somehow come back with nothing.
Yes.
That's a little
So-
odd.
In addition to the blood and the urine, what other substance or aspect or something recovered from Julie Jensen's body was tested for ethylene glycol?
The stomach contents.
And who tested the stomach contents?
For ethylene glycol, it was St. Louis University.
And what did the St. Louis University Forensic Toxicology Lab find with respect to the gastric contents?
The first test that they did, the flame ionization detector test, came back at 3,940 micrograms per milliliter. And the second test came back at 4,121 micrograms per milliliter in the stomach contents.
So, Doctor, we're going to get back to ethylene glycol a little bit, but now I want to talk about some of the other substances that were found to be present in the various systems of Julie Jensen. First of all, was ethylene glycol found elsewhere in Julie Jensen's system?
Yes,
Where else was it found?
in the liver and in the brain.
And which test was it that found them in the liver and the brain?
Again, it was the GC mass spectroscopy.
So the the gaschromatograph flame ionization detector did not discover the presence or reveal the presence of ethylene glycol in either the liver or the brain.
That's correct.
But then subsequently, the gaschromatograph mass spectrometer was used, and it found what?
It found in the liver 51 micrograms per gram of ethylene glycol, and in the brain 16 micrograms per gram.
Now, looking at all the toxicology screens that were done by the various laboratories, were there other substances found within the body of Julie Jensen?
Yes.
So tell me what other items were found in the body of Julie Jensen before the first hearing.
Before the first hearing, honestly, I don't recall if certain labs were before or after. If the Wisconsin State Lab of Hygiene was before the first hearing, I believe it was.
What did the Wisconsin State Lab of Hygiene find?
They found zolpidem in the blood, which is just the generic name for Ambien. They also found it in the stomach. Let's see, they found paroxetine or Paxil in the stomach. And they found, this is a long one, chlorodiazepoxide, also known as Librium, in the stomach.
Now, I'm going to show you these lab reports and see if that refreshes your recollection as to whether they come before or after the first hearing.
99.
April 7th of 1999.
Yes,
So long before you started with the Kenosha County Medical Examiner's Office.
correct.
So again, the zolpidem, which is the generic name for Ambien, was how much of it was found and where was it found?
It was in the blood at 82 nanograms per milliliter, and it was in the stomach. They measured 1.5 milligrams total.
And was diphenhydramine found anywhere?
Yes,
Where was diphenhydramine found?
that's the generic name for Benadryl, and that was found. Excuse me, that was found by a different lab. That was found by AIT.
And how much was found to be in the gastric content by AIT?
113 nanograms per milliliter.
And diphenhydramine was also found to be present by NMS. Is that true?
Yes, in the blood.
And diphenhydramine again is the generic name for.
Benadryl.
Now, was any paroxetine found anywhere within the body of Julie Jensen?
Paroxetine was found in the stomach contents and was not found in the blood.
And who found it which labs found it in the stomach contents?
The Wisconsin State Lab of Hygiene and AIT.
Huh. That's interesting. So some labs are
And you
finding
also said that
some
chlorodiazepoxide
stuff.
was
some
found to be
labs are
present by the
not.
Wisconsin Lab of Hygiene in her gastric contents.
Yes,
And what is chlorodiazepoxide?
Librium.
Now, when you obtained this information in advance of the first hearing, had you seen any reference to Librium in any of the documents that you reviewed?
Yes,
You recall seeing a photograph of a Post-it note that had been found on Mark Jensen's day planner?
yes,
And that was one of the items listed on that Post-it note. Is that true?
yes.
All right, come on, get with your questions. We haven't got all night.
I'm going to show you this document that's been marked previously as States Exhibit 15. So, directing your attention to States Exhibit 15. What is that?
No, this is a photograph of a page from Mark Jensen's day planner with a Post-it note on it listing a number of different items.
Well, why don't you read the list to the extent that you can read it?
Okay. Own drug supply, Nicotrol. I don't know what that says. N-O. Aspirin,
Hey,
bottle hyphen
welcome,
booze,
welcome.
razor blades, Librium hyphen shells, Defazio,
Everybody,
Harry with an I, patches,
say welcome
shells,
to the
syringe,
Cool Frog
and bag hands.
Army.
And were you made aware of who wrote that Post-it note?
Yes.
So good to
Wait,
see
wait,
you
wait.
guys.
Jensen.
Wonderful.
And Julie Jensen
Welcome.
photographed that bicycle,
Welcome.
correct?
Yes.
And she provided that photo. She provided the film to law enforcement.
Good to
Yes.
see you. Good to see you.
Now,
Nice. Hey, Grim.
let's
Grim's
talk about
Bar.
ethylene glycol poisoning. In the course of your investigation of this matter, did you learn
What
the
is
approximate
up?
size
What
and weight
is
of Julie
up?
Jensen at the time of her death?
Yes.
Good to
How
see
much did she
you.
weigh?
She was 115 pounds, I believe. This was at the doctor's office
Yes.
3 days prior to her death.
And that was her estimated weight at the time of autopsy too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think Dr. Chambers might have said 110 pounds. That was an estimate.
So she weighed between 110 and 115 pounds at the time of her death.
Yes.
Now, doctor, are you familiar with the toxic effects of ethylene glycol in the human body?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the manner in which ethylene glycol is metabolized by the human body?
Yes.
What I'd like you to do is describe to the jury what ethylene glycol does to the human body as it is ingested and then absorbed. I'd like you to describe what it does to the body and also what symptoms a person who's ingested ethylene glycol is likely to manifest at various stages.
Okay. This will take a little while. Ethylene glycol is an alcohol. Its structure is very similar to ethanol or beverage alcohol that many of us enjoy. When ethylene glycol is first ingested, it has the same effect as beverage alcohol does. A person will act drunk or loopy, or
Oh,
they could,
yeah.
have trouble walking. They could stumble around. Depending on how much a person takes, they could have seizures. They could even enter into a coma. And all of this can happen, from about 30 minutes after exposure to about 12 hours after
Make sure you hit
exposure.
that like.
So that's the first phase. That's what they call the first
Jump
phase
over
of
onto
ethylene glycol poisoning. Following
Rumble
that,
if you've got it.
the amount of ethylene glycol in the
Join
body
up over there.
decreases because
See
it's
if we
being
can get that
processed
thing up
by the
to
liver.
25.
So as it's processed by the liver, it's processed into a number of other
Hey,
compounds,
definitely, Kay.
all of which are acids.
Good to see
The
you.
most important one
Hope you had
for
a
the
good
next
time.
phase 2 of ethylene glycol poisoning is called glycolic acid, glycolic. And that causes the body to do whatever it can to try and get rid of the excess acid in the blood. So the person will start to hyperventilate. You can get rid of acid by breathing fast, by getting rid of carbon dioxide. The person will hyperventilate, and then they'll have really deep and abnormal breathing. They also can have heart symptoms. The heart can pound. It can beat fast. It could even fail. That's the second stage of poisoning, and that starts anywhere from 12 to 24 hours
Thanks, buddy.
after the ethylene glycol is ingested. As the ethylene glycol is processed into glycolic acid and then into other acids, one of which is oxalic acid, it combines. The oxalic acid combines with calcium in the blood. Calcium's always floating around in the blood, and makes crystals. Crystals, just oxalate crystals, and these crystals can lodge in the kidney.
I wouldn't
And
suggest.
cause kidney damage. The acids themselves also cause kidney damage. So the third stage, starting about maybe 24 to 72 hours
Oh,
after taking ethylene glycol, is called the renal or kidney phase. And that's where you can see the kidneys fail. And you can see death in any one of the three phases. It all depends on the dose
I would
and what
not
kind of, if the
suggest
person got any kind of therapy, etc.
Now, during the course of your examination of this case, did you undertake to prepare your own slides of the tissue samples of Julie Jensen?
Yes.
Did you examine, for example, did you produce slides of the kidney sample from Julie Jensen?
Yes.
What you do to produce a slide? What is it that you do to produce a tissue of slides? A slide of tissue sample.
Right. At autopsy or even in the laboratory, as far as that goes in the hospital, the pathologist will receive a literal piece of tissue. And what's done is that it gets fixed in formalin. So it's a preservative. It's fixed in a preservative. Then it gets processed. The water's removed from it, and it's ultimately embedded in paraffin wax. And it's like into a little block about the size, a little bigger than a postage stamp. That block of wax with tissue embedded is cut very thin, very, very thin, on an instrument called a microtome. And like we're talking 5 micrometers maybe. And anyway, that tissue is ultimately placed onto a glass slide and stained so that the structures become visible. And that's what the pathologist looks at under the microscope.
So you cut some slide tissue samples and you examined them?
Yes.
And I'll show you a series of photographs been marked S83 through S88. We'll go through them one at a time. So let's start with S83. And then could you make sure that the television screen is on? It's on. So can you tell us what S83 is?
Yes, this is a close-up picture of a kidney, of Julie Jensen's kidney tissue, showing structures called tubules. And within those tubules, you can see one foreign body, which is a glycolic acid crystal.
So now look at the screen, if you will, up there. Can you see my cursor moving around there?
Oh boy, I can't see it.
Can you see it? No, look at the screen up there, doctor. Look at the wall over there. Now you can see a lot better. Can you see it now? And
Yes.
can you see my cursor moving around?
Yes.
So is this a tubule right here?
Yes.
And also right here?
Yes.
And then another one right over here?
Yes.
And then there's one right here. And
Yes.
what is this substance inside that kidney tubule?
That's a crystal, a glycolic or an oxalic acid crystal.
No. And that's kind of a characteristic form there that, you know, I didn't know what sheaves of wheat look like, even though I grew up in Wisconsin, but is that oxalic acid crystals, they say resemble sheaves of wheat. Is that the description that they provide?
Yes.
So that's supposed to be what sheaves of wheat look like.
Yes.
Right there. Okay. So, and then I'm going to proceed to the next slide.
Microgon. Give me the microgon.
And directing your attention to this slide, can you tell the jury what that is?
This is another close-up picture of kidney tubules. Okay, so and then you see kind of going diagonally across the screen in the middle, there's a tubule cut the long way. Think of the tubules as like pieces of spaghetti. So if you cut it cross-section, you'll see a round structure on the side. If you cut it the long way, you'll see like a long tubular structure.
And that's what you're seeing here, this long tubular structure here?
Yes.
And what are these white items here?
That's oxalic acid crystals.
Okay, if we're going to go through all of this, I'm going to skip forward because
And
I
what does it say?
understand.
What is, this is exhibit S, this is S80.
This is what they found in her
let me check which exhibit
bloodstream.
this is.
Got it.
This looks like 87.
So exhibit S87.
Out there that you can use. One
There
of the
we go.
calculations that I looked at said about 50 milliliters, but it's true that as little as 30 milliliters can be fatal.
Well, and the effect that it has on the body, I mean, the effect that, say, 30 or 40 or 50 milligrams or milliliters would have on the body is dependent to some extent upon the size of the body, correct?
Yes.
So as adults go, Julie Jensen weighed between 110 and 115 pounds. And that's relatively on the small side for an adult.
Yes.
I mean, I weigh 200 pounds, and maybe a little more, but we'll say 200 for the record. A person that weighs 200 pounds would probably be able to withstand a dose of ethylene glycol, say a 30 milliliter dose of ethylene glycol,
Yes.
better than
Very
110,
horrible way to
115 pounds.
die.
Generally speaking, probably.
But a person that is Julie Jensen's size of 110, 115 pounds, what would be the minimal amount of ethylene glycol that would need to be ingested in order to produce this kind of result where she had ethylene glycol in her stomach, in her kidneys, these ethylene glycol or these oxalic acid crystals in her kidneys, and then 55 to 57, 50 to 55 micrograms per milliliter in her blood. How much ethylene glycol would you need to ingest in order to produce that?
In order to produce that, as little as 10 milliliters. After taking as little as 10 milliliters, you can see crystals forming in the kidneys. After,
Now, before the first hearing, you had heard evidence that Julie was manifesting symptoms in the early morning hours of December 2nd, correct? In the late
Yes.
evening hours of December 1st and the early morning hours of December 2nd.
yes.
And what symptoms was she manifesting according to the reports that you reviewed?
She was in the first stage of ethylene glycol
This is a
poisoning
hearsay.
intoxication stage, where she's showing the effect of the unprocessed alcohol itself of ethylene glycol. So she was acting drunk.
And that was on the evening of the 1st and the early morning hours of the 2nd, correct?
Yes.
And then did you hear about a phone call that Julie made to her friend and neighbor, Margaret Voigt?
Yes.
And that occurred at about 10 a.m. on December 2nd?
Yes.
And at that time, was there anything about what you heard about that phone conversation that would cause you to draw any inferences about whether or not Julie Jensen was still experiencing or still under the influence of ethylene glycol?
Margaret Voigt described Julie Jensen's voice as being like somebody who was drunk.
And that's a sign of ethylene glycol intoxication?
Yes.
The first stage of ethylene glycol poisoning?
Yes.
And at that point, Julie had said to
Come
her
on.
friend and neighbor, "Poof,
Come on,
I can't believe the effect
defense.
this medication is having on me." Something to that effect, correct?
Yes.
Now, then there was information about Julie Jensen's presentation on the morning of December 3rd. Remember what you heard about the presentation of Julie Jensen on the morning of December 3rd?
Yes.
So tell the jury what you can remember about the presentation of Julie Jensen on the morning of December 3rd.
She was very lethargic, very weak, and she was breathing quite heavily.
And Mark
Does
Jensen
not
received
sound
the report that she was unable to
fun.
get out of bed.
Yes.
True?
Yes.
And that's consistent with what stage of ethylene glycol poisoning?
The second.
Now, and how is that consistent with more than one dose of ethylene glycol poisoning?
The half-life, or for the amount of time ethylene glycol remains in the body is really pretty short. If you take a single dose of it,
Unless you
you absorb it probably
die.
within a half hour or so. You have a peak amount in the bloodstream in about an hour, and then it gradually disappears. So a half-life means that half of the dose has already been processed or metabolized, has gone through the body. So it normally takes, after like 5 half-lives, you shouldn't really see any of the parent compound anymore.
In the,
ethylene
where?
glycol
You wouldn't see any more of the compound where after 5 half-lives?
in the blood.
And yet she had 55 micrograms to 50 micrograms per milliliter in the blood
Yes.
at the time of her death.
Yes.
And if she'd only had one ingestion on the evening of December 1st, you wouldn't expect to see anything in her blood.
That's correct.
Is that what caused you to draw the inference that she was likely to have had 2 doses of ethylene glycol
Yes.
before the first hearing?
Yes.
After the first hearing and before the second hearing, you'd received additional information, correct?
Yes.
So let's talk about your diagnosis, your conclusions before the first hearing. Did you render an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to the cause and manner of death at the first hearing?
Yes.
And can you tell us, after examining all this evidence and these slides and everything, and the police reports and the crime scene photographs and the autopsy photographs, did you come to an opinion to reasonable medical certainty as to the cause of Julie's death?
This is a retrial.
What was your opinion to reasonable medical certainty as to the cause of Julie's death at the first hearing?
Ethylene glycol poisoning.
Did you make any reference to the possibility of asphyxia?
At the first hearing, I don't recall.
Do you recall saying that you couldn't rule out asphyxia?
I do recall that.
So your first opinion was that it was ethylene glycol poisoning, but you couldn't rule out asphyxia as a contributing factor.
That's correct.
And did you have an opinion to reasonable medical certainty at the first hearing as to the manner of death?
Yes.
And what was your opinion to reasonable medical certainty as to the manner of death?
Homicide.
Now, what was it that caused you to believe that this was a homicide as opposed to some other types, for example, a suicide?
The picture did not fit that of a suicide. The history, the circumstances, as I was explaining earlier.
What?
The
So you're a
circumstances surrounding the
detective
death,
now.
all these things that
Thought
take
you
into
were
account
a
did not
forensic
fit the pattern of
pathologist.
suicide at all.
So let's talk about the circumstances that you were aware of before the first hearing that caused you to believe that the circumstances did not fit the diagnosis of suicide. What were those factors that you can, if you can remember some of them?
Well, first of all, someone commits suicide with ethylene glycol with antifreeze. They're typically going to take one dose, and they'll take a large enough dose, to kill themselves. That's their intent, to kill themselves. So
Yeah.
what typically happens is they're either found dead, or they're found
Exactly.
in really bad shape. Somebody takes them to the hospital, and oftentimes they die later despite getting medical attention. So that's typical for a suicide. The amount of ethylene glycol in the blood is typically higher in a suicide case than it is in a homicide case.
How much higher?
To the order of 10 to 100, or tens or hundreds more.
So 10 times more to 200 times more.
Yes, even higher.
What else about the circumstances leading up to Julie's death were inconsistent with a suicide or more consistent with a homicide?
She denied being suicidal to her doctor. She went to the doctor on December 1st,
Hearsay.
and he specifically asked her
Hearsay.
about suicide, and she said, "No, I'm not suicidal."
Now, you also, when you're looking at potential causes or manners of death, you're also looking at homicide, correct?
Yes,
And were there factors that you looked at in this case that caused you to think that this is more consistent with a homicide than a suicide?
yes.
So what are the factors that you looked at that caused you to conclude that this was a homicide?
There were indications that Julie Jensen was very fearful for her life prior to her death, in the few weeks leading up to her death.
She'd
Haven't
spoken
proven
to two
that
years
yet.
ago,
Yes,
and she'd spoken to her sister-in-law, Laura Custer, who's also the defendant's sister,
yes,
and she expressed concerns about possibly Mark was trying to harm her or kill her or poison her.
yes,
Now, you'd also learned of searches on the internet for ethylene glycol poisoning and for other types of poisoning,
yes,
and those were on the Jensen home computer.
yes.
Judge, I do object to the leading.
Exactly.
She has considered without feeding it to her.
Well, Your Honor, remember,
Just rephrase it and we'll keep going, okay?
so what were some of the other factors that you considered? Well, did you consider the computer evidence?
Yes, I did.
And what was it about the computer evidence that caused you to lean toward homicide rather than suicide?
There were numerous searches for different kinds of poisonings, undetected poison, a whole lot of different categories. There were probably over a dozen different subjects relating to poisoning or death.
Now, had you also heard about any motive for the defendant, Mark Jensen, to want to murder his wife?
I was aware that Mark Jensen was involved with another woman.
He was having an affair.
Yes,
Now, you also heard about a pattern of abuse and humiliation and gaslighting that had taken place over the preceding 7 or 8 years.
yes.
Same objection as before, Your Honor.
Rephrase the question.
Were you
Yes.
aware of any efforts on the part of the
It's like,
defendant to
geez,
shame,
come
humiliate,
on.
emotionally torture, or gaslight Julie Jensen in the years preceding her death?
I maintain that objection.
Exactly.
Yes.
So what were you aware of?
Good
What
thing
did you
she
become aware
doesn't
of?
have any idea about.
Julie
Come
Jensen,
on.
was known to have had an affair in the early 1990s. Following this affair, pornographic pictures started to turn up at the Jensen home, at Mark Jensen's place of employment, on, I believe, on the family car, et cetera, et cetera. And there were suspicious phone calls. And
Suspicious
ultimately
phone calls.
determined
And how
that,
does this play
Mark
in?
Jensen was the
I don't
source
get it.
of these pictures and these phone calls.
So this is the factual background
Defense
that you had
should
at your
be just
disposal
all
in advance of the
this.
first hearing when you rendered your opinions to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to the cause and manner of death in Julie Jensen.
Yes,
And then there was a second hearing. Do you remember that?
yes.
No. Can you tell the jury what happened between the
Now we're
first hearing and
on
the second hearing?
hearing number
That-
3.
Well, I'll rephrase it. you recall whether there was anything that happened or anything that was brought to your attention between the first and the second hearing that altered your perception of what had occurred in this case?
Yes.
What had happened that caused you to alter your perception of what had occurred in this case?
Witnesses came forward, additional witnesses.
What does that have to do with anything?
So what was the name of the witness that you can, one of the witnesses that you can recall?
Aaron Dillard.
Jesus.
Did you review Aaron Dillard's statement?
Yes.
Did you review the letter that he wrote to his attorney?
Yes.
And did you compare the content of that letter that Mark Jensen had, that Aaron Dillard written to his attorney to the facts in this case?
Yes.
Did you find that there was anything about the facts in this case that correlated to or were supported by the content of that letter?
Yes.
See the letter. Come on.
So bear with me while I pull up another slide panel here. Now, in advance of the first hearing, you had gone through all the crime scene photos, correct?
Yes.
And you'd gone through the autopsy photos, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Come on.
So directing your attention to the screen, this is part of Exhibit S10. In advance of the first hearing, you'd seen this crime scene photo, Exhibit S10,
Yes.
and you noticed a couple of things about the body. For example, you noticed the way the hand, the left arm was underneath the body.
Yes.
And did it appear that
Okay.
it was a normal position for a person to roll into on their own?
I thought that was an unnatural position.
And you did learn that Mark Jensen had indicated to Detective Ratsburg that he had rolled Julie into that position.
Yes.
And actually, that position is consistent with her being rolled into that position.
Yes.
Okay. You gonna follow that up with a question? Oh,
Now, you'd also seen the autopsy photos, correct?
Yes.
And you'd seen the autopsy photos of the subcutaneous bruising along the rib cage.
Yes.
But had you ever lined up the subcutaneous bruising photograph to the crime scene photograph that I just displayed to you?
Not prior to the first hearing.
But you did so after the first hearing.
Yes.
And you did that because of the testimony of, or because of the statement of Aaron Dillard?
Yes.
And directing your attention to the screen. Oh, no, I had to push it all the way. So now directing your attention to the screen. Is that the side-by-side display of these two photographs?
Yes.
And you see here the way the arm of Julie Jensen is laid out beneath her as though when she was rolled into that position.
Yes.
And then directing your attention here, you see subcutaneous, you see these marks here. This is rib 2, correct?
Yes.
And this is rib 3 here.
Yes.
And this is rib 4 there.
Yes.
And what do you notice about rib 2 here? What can you tell the jury about this mark right here?
There's some hemorrhage or bruising.
And that was not visible on the outside of Julie. It was only visible after her skin had been reflected after the classic Y incision at autopsy.
Yes.
And then there's another bruise mark here. Is that correct?
Yes.
my thoughts are is they're giving them a hell of a railroading unless they're going to come back with some good questions and there's a reason why they're allowing some of her answers in there. My thoughts on all of this so far, he's getting railroaded all to hell. And defense is, I don't know what the hell, why they're not objecting on a lot of this. Possibly because it was already allowed in the first and second hearing. I don't know. This is just ridiculous. You know, I don't know if they're public defenders or not. I really don't know.
That's on the third rib.
Yes.
And then there's another one here on the fourth rib.
Yes.
And here Julie's laid on her back after the autopsy. But when you line Julie up, you line those injuries up, putting the arm underneath her, pretty closely lines up with those subcutaneous injuries to her rib cage. Is that true?
Yes.
And you had noticed that before you read Aaron Dillard's statement.
I'm sorry. Repeat
You had
that?
not noticed the way this lined up like this until after you read Aaron Dillard's statement.
That's correct.
You read Aaron Dillard's statement and you put these photos side by side.
Yes.
Okay. So here's a picture of
I'm going to direct your attention
bullshit
to the.
and another picture of
I'm
bullshit.
gonna first of all, ask you to look at this document that's been marked as S69.
Do we still need a photo?
No, we do not. I'm going to take that down. And you're
Yeah,
turning around
please
and
do.
Some of the same things you were saying. So.
Yeah.
It's been marked as S69. The document?
Yes, this is a letter written by Aaron Dillard to a Gretchen Rosenke.
And did you compare the content of this letter to the police investigation that had taken place up to this point?
Yes,
And did you compare it to the crime scene photos and the autopsy photos?
yes.
Now, directing your attention to page 3. In page 3, Mr. Dillard is making reference to a prior attempt of the defendant. The defendant indicated that he previously attempted to kill Julie when he was at some conference in St. Louis. Did you see that?
Yes,
And did you compare that to
What does this have to do with it? Come
Yes.
on,
And you aware that
object.
there was evidence that Julie had become very sick while Mark Jensen was at the St. Louis Forensic Toxicology, I'm sorry, not St. Louis Forensic, at the St. Louis Blueprint meeting, correct?
correct.
And what was the evidence that you were aware of that she'd become sick while he was gone?
She had become ill. She had vomited from the bathroom or the bedroom to the bathroom, and
It was all over the carpet,
yes,
and there was a cleaning bill for the carpet, correct?
correct.
And you were aware of that at the time that you first read this.
Yes,
But at the time that you first heard about this vomiting incident, you not heard about Mark Jensen poisoning her before he left.
no,
But this statement is corroborated by that piece of evidence that you knew about concerning this prior carpet cleaning bill.
Object to this leading.
Exactly.
Just rephrase it, Mr. Chairman.
So could you state whether or not it appeared to you that that Aaron Dillard's statement as to what Mark Jensen told him about trying to kill Julie while he was at some conference, was that consistent or was that inconsistent with the evidence that you'd already heard about her being sick while he was at a conference?
consistent.
Oh, come on.
Now, in this, I'm directing your attention to page 4. Aaron Dillard wrote in his letter to his attorney, on a Tuesday, he took her to a doctor, and that doctor gave her a prescription for Paxil. Later that day, he gave her the Paxil as well as Benadryl, St. John's wort, Literal, and other drugs to make her woozy. Have you heard of a drug called Literal?
No,
But you've heard of a drug called Librium.
yes,
And
Yes,
indicated that he
Lurch
gave her a
is the
few
one on
glasses of
trial.
antifreeze in it. To make her feel better. And
Da da
now
da da.
that's you had not heard
Da
that
da
Julie
da
Jensen had
da.
been administered a few glasses of juice with
Da da
antifreeze
da
before
da.
reading this
Da
letter.
da da da.
No.
Da 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 da.
But that's consistent with the information that you had in this case, that she was manifesting signs of intoxication in the early morning hours of December 2nd.
that's correct.
And then he wrote, she was up jumping around in the bed and saying she was drunk. He said he took her to the computer to comfort her and show her it was a side effect of Paxil. Correct? That's in this.
Yes.
And were you aware if there was any evidence that would support that proposition?
If that's a side effect of Paxil, it's got to be extremely rare. I have never even heard of that.
But were you aware that in fact Mark Jensen had printed out information about paroxetine?
Yes,
And paroxetine is the generic name for Paxil.
yes,
And he writes in here, the next day he went to the doctor to talk to him about her, and that doctor gave him the medicine Ambien. And now, is that consistent or inconsistent with the information that you'd already received concerning this case?
consistent.
And he indicated, he said that way she would sleep through all the effects of the antifreeze. And now, can you tell us what effect taking Ambien has on a normal person?
Ambien is a drug that helps a person fall asleep.
It's a powerful enough drug that it requires a prescription to get it, right?
Yes,
I mean, I can't walk down to Walgreens and just buy a bottle of Ambien.
no,
I need a doctor's prescription.
yes.
Now, you've gone through Dr. Borman's notes. Did he indicate anything at all about Julie having difficulty sleeping?
He said that Mark Jensen told him that she was having trouble sleeping and that if she could get something to help her sleep, that might help her feel better.
So the only part of Dr. Borman's notes about Julie having difficulty sleeping was the information provided to Dr. Borman by Mark Jensen.
That's correct.
And then again on page 5, he said that he gave her some more juice, quote juice, with antifreeze, and he intoned juice when he said juice, and she was throwing it up a little. No,
In
before reading this,
tone.
you hadn't actually heard any indication
Oh,
that Mark
come
Jensen had actually
on.
given her a second dose of antifreeze. Is that true?
Yes,
But the evidence in this case is consistent with her taking more than one dose of antifreeze.
yes,
And then Aaron Dillard writes to his attorney, he said she was really sick in the morning and the kids wanted to call the ambulance and he calmed them down. He said he gave her another sleeping pill so that she would just sleep. Now,
yes.
at the time of her death,
Yep.
Ambien or Zolpidem was found in Julie's body. Is that true?
Yes,
Was it found in her blood or was it found in her gastric content?
both.
So that's consistent with the information that Aaron Dillard was providing in this letter.
Yes,
So he said he then gave her another sleeping pill so she would sleep and said to me he thought she would be dead by the time he got home from running around. He said he went out, kids to school, some check thing, and came home. He said she was breathing better and he was scared she was not going to die before the kids got home and they would force him to call an ambulance. He said she was sound asleep and very non-responsive. Is that consistent with the third stage of ethylene glycol poisoning?
yes,
Particularly if somebody's also been administered Ambien?
yes,
Yep.
He writes here, said she was sleeping on her back and he rolled her over a bit and she did not wake up. So he rolled her over on her face with her face in the pillow. He thought that would make it hard for her to breathe.
But it doesn't
He left her
fit
for a
the
bit, came back,
narrative.
and she was still alive.
That's why I'm
No.
surprised they're not objecting. It might be
Julie's
so
body
that they
was
can
Julie's
bring this
crime
stuff
scene,
back
the
in
crime
whenever
scene
they have
was
their
consistent with this
experts get
description,
up
was it not?
there.
Yes.
And Mr. Diller then wrote,
Because it
then he got
makes
on
her
top
look
of her and pushed her
really,
head into the
really
pillow, sat on
biased.
her back so she could not breathe, and she died and he went to work. Now, that last part is something that you've not heard before. Is that true?
That's correct.
But is that consistent or inconsistent with the photo that I just showed to you and to the jury?
It's consistent.
Now, is there any way that Aaron Diller could have obtained this information unless the person who murdered Julie Jensen gave it to him?
Question argumentative.
I'll allow the answer.
I can't think of another source.
Unless she was taking
Well,
it
you looked at all evidence in this
herself.
case, correct?
Yes.
And you're a trained forensic pathologist,
Yes.
a medical doctor.
Yes, I am.
You've done thousands of autopsies.
Yes.
You'd examined the crime scene photos.
Yes.
You'd examined the autopsy photos.
Yes.
You looked at all the tox screens.
Yes.
And you had not come to the conclusion or formulated the hypothesis that Mark Jensen sat on Julie and shoved her face in the pillow and asphyxiated her. You had not come to that conclusion, had you?
No.
You'd not ruled out terminal asphyxia, said you couldn't rule it out, but you'd not concluded that she died by
Yes.
terminal asphyxia.
That's correct.
Now, if Julie Jensen had not been asphyxiated, the ethylene glycol on board could have killed her without medical intervention. Is that true?
Yes.
Even though it seemed like it was a relatively small amount.
Yes.
But it's only after reading Aaron Dillard's description of Mark Jensen's confession that you compared the autopsy photos demonstrating the subcutaneous injuries to Julie Jensen's ribcage to the crime scene photo showing her having been rolled into that position, correct?
Correct.
Now, if Julie had just been rolled into that position and left there and died, could have been a possible explanation of maybe positional asphyxia contributing to ethylene glycol poisoning. Is that a possibility?
Yes.
However, would positional asphyxia
However,
explain
now
the
we're
injuries to the
making them
ribcage?
shut up.
No.
She only weighed 110, 115 pounds, right?
That's correct.
So this skinny, tiny woman just laying on her side with her arm between her chest and a mattress would not cause those kinds of injuries to the ribcage.
I probably not.
But a guy the size of Mark Jensen, 165, 170 pounds, sitting on top of his wife,
But
shoving her
if they
face into
were
the pillow
trying
until she was
to-
dead, that would cause those kinds of injuries, wouldn't it?
It could, yes.
If they're
Do you think
trying
anything
to
else would cause those kinds of
bring her
injuries
back
the
to
ribcage
life,
Julie
there's a
Jensen?
possibility.
Not that fits the evidence in this case.
Now, so Aaron Dillard, you're aware that he's a con man.
Yes.
But he's not a seer, is he? You're
Not to my
aware?
knowledge.
He doesn't talk to the dead.
I hope not.
I mean, there was a television series called Medium, where I forgot the name of that wonderful actress who was a medium.
No, but
We don't
prosecutor
know
could have
much
fed
mediums
them a
that
whole,
talks to dead people, do we?
fed him some
Not that I know of.
information. Could have.
No.
Not saying he did. Anything
Out of
could
the
have
4,000 or
happened.
so autopsy cases that you've been involved in, have you ever seen a case like this one before?
Not in the cases I've personally been involved in.
But you followed up on this case, didn't you?
Yes.
You did some research on your own.
Yes.
You compared suicides by ethylene glycol to homicides by ethylene glycol.
Yes.
And how many different suicides by ethylene glycol were you able to examine?
I looked at 15 of them.
And how many homicides by ethylene glycol poisoning did you examine?
Well, this one I examined directly. There were about 10 that were public knowledge.
But you didn't get all the tox screens from the homicides.
Not all of them.
But you got tox screens from some of the homicides.
Yes.
And you got tox screens from the suicides.
Yes.
What did you find in this analysis of ethylene glycol poisonings, suicide versus homicide? What did you find about what inferences did you draw, what evidence did you see
Speculation.
concerning the amount of ethylene glycol in a person
What's
who
to
died by
say that
suicide
she didn't
versus a
take
person who died by
some,
homicide?
start out
Objection,
with, it
false
didn't do the
91.3.
job, took some more.
Take a break, folks.
Yeah. About time they object to this bullshit.
And that's when she told me about it, that she'd been doing this research on her own, and she came up with this information yesterday.
Oh.
So it's true. Maybe I should have told about it yesterday, but I didn't.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do is, what's that? I looked at 971.23. Actually, I'm
Jesus.
looking at it right now.
Yeah, she couldn't look up the effects of
So let's
Paxil.
examine my statutory obligations. We produced, first of all, they already have her testimony from last hearing. Of course, she didn't testify about this, but they were aware of what her testimony was going to be as to cause and manner of death. And I'm going to pull up 971.23.
Under sub E, it talks about
It wasn't
results of
antifreeze, it was
scientific tests,
ethylene
experiments,
glycol.
comparisons that the district attorney
If you
has
take
offered
enough
evidence at trial,
ethylene
which is about
glycol,
evidence. So, I mean,
plus you
I did
take some
object on
drugs
other
to
things
help
that,
you
know,
sleep,
her-
and
I
you
didn't know
take
about her
some
prior testimony causing manner
Paxil,
of death
and
opinion.
you
Didn't know
take a
about
whole
this,
bunch
and
of
I would
other
suggest this
stuff.
is not a reasonable amount of time before trial. I'd ask that this be prohibited from me going into.
And I think she had 4 different drugs that were
do you have something
coursing
in
through her
writing as to
system.
what she was going to testify?
I'm sorry, Your Honor,
Do you have anything in writing as to what she was going to testify as to the comparison tests?
I don't have anything in writing. I don't. I don't have a report from her. I talked to her about this yesterday, and she was indicating that the average amount of ethylene glycol on board in a suicide is 2,000 micrograms per milliliter.
Because the statute then also talks about if the expert does not prepare a statement, there should be a written summary of the findings of the subject matter of the testimony. So we
There
don't
you
have a
go.
written
Don't
statement.
let it in.
We don't have a written summary.
I don't, Your Honor. What I have is what she told me yesterday, and I suppose I could have told about it yesterday, but that's when I found out about it.
For the record, we're not going there then, based on
Good.
971.23. So the
Okay, well, Your Honor, at this point, then I would at least like to have her produce those notes, and I'll make copies of them, provide them to defense counsel, because it may be something that we'll go into on cross-examination of one of their experts, and it may be something we can go into in rebuttal after the defense has rested its case.
welcome to do that.
I'd ask that jury be instructed to that prior testimony as it related to her doing these comparisons be stricken and instructed to disregard it.
If I'm listening, hopefully I'm correct. We never got into the studies. She just talked about them, right?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, she talked about
We
having.
didn't get to the, what did you find, right?
I objected in time for that, but she did talk about.
Did a good job,
no.
Mr. Perry.
Thank you.
So you want me to just say, hey, don't,
I doubt it.
the last test transcript or testimony, she said that they are tests that's stricken.
That she's done these comparisons, that be stricken.
And then Mr. Jambois, you free to give the defense the summary of,
Well, I've got to look at it first. I don't know if she's got it with her. Let me.
This would have been 1998 that she died. And
All right.
Lurch was
and we'll mark it.
tried and convicted in 2007. And I believe Judge Schrader kicked it back and said something didn't quite make sense in this, and now they're doing a retrial. Yeah.
Break then.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're not going to bring back the jury and then tell them we're doing a morning break at 10:30. We'll just take our morning break, and then when they come back, I'll instruct them. And I just want to, on the record, that the defense is getting a copy of this report, so we're going to wait, and then we'll take our break.
Yes, Your Honor. And then I was
Yes,
hoping
it
I could do a brief
was.
voir dire of the witness about this information, so that they will have that
I
information,
had
so
some
that
good
I
times in
cross-examine their expert on it.
98.
They'll have that information, and they'll have that much of a report from the witness.
We'll do it after the break.
Yes, Your Honor.
Well, let's wait for the report because you marked it. I want that part of the record.
Okay, I am going to mark it. I haven't marked it yet, but I will mark it.
Brought in the courtroom by the bailiff.
All right. Let's skip. We will skip. We will skip.
Attorney.
The original exhibit to Dr. Mainland.
Okay. let's take
I
our
did
10-minute
not
break.
touch them
This
girls.
is a morning break, so
I swear I didn't inhale. All right. So let's skip a little bit more. There we go. And right about there.
Okay.
You knew that before you did this. Car accidents.
Yes.
There we go. It's been a lot of these moments. Yes. And just imagine, I'm doing this on 1.75 speed. Imagine if I was running this in real time. Oh my God. Torture.
I'll bring the jury back now. We're going back on the record on Mark Jensen, 2002 CF 314. We had discussed a discovery issue in a summary report that Dr. Malin provided regarding some tests that she was looking at regarding the issue of suicide versus homicide regarding the poisoning issue. You wanted to do some voir dire questions, Mr. Jambois?
Yes, Your Honor. First, I'm going to provide you a copy so you know what we're talking about.
All right. It's been marked, correct?
90.
All right. 90 has been marked. The defense has a copy. Correct, Mr. Perry?
That's right.
Thank you.
So,
Oh.
Dr. Mainland, the judge had described this as a report, but it's not actually a report, is it? It's
No, just some notes.
just some notes that you had obtained by looking at suicide, ethylene glycol suicides,
Yes.
ethylene glycol accidents,
Yes.
and then undetermined.
Correct.
Now, in the suicides that you looked at, the ranges of ethylene glycol that were found at the time of autopsy, and this is expressed in micrograms per milliliter, is that correct?
Milligrams per liter.
Milligram.
Micrograms per milliliter and milligrams per liter are the same thing,
Okay.
but you don't have to remember that.
Yeah,
This is
you do.
comparable to the units that Julie Jensen's blood, the
So-
reports
Okay.
use.
So the first one is 570,
Yes.
7400,
Yes.
2640,
Yes.
not determined,
Not detected.
not detected. Okay. 740,
Yes.
1200,
Yes.
830,
Yes.
less than 20,
Yes.
259,
Yes.
9746,
Yes.
1200,
Yes.
966,
Yes.
4600,
Yes.
not detected,
Correct.
and 930.
Yes.
Now, where have you found these ethylene glycol suicide autopsy reports?
These are cases that came through some of the offices where I worked, Milwaukee, Tampa. I think there were a couple in there from Waukesha.
Now, when you saw some of these autopsy reports reflect not detected or less than 20, did you examine those reports to determine whether or not medical intervention had occurred?
Yes.
And had medical intervention occurred?
Yes, most of them.
In the
Thank you.
cases where medical intervention had not occurred, the results were higher?
Generally speaking, yes.
And overall, in looking at the suicides, the average amount of ethylene glycol, number of milligrams per liter of ethylene glycol was 2,072,
Correct.
which is about 40 times the amount that was in Julie Jensen's blood.
Something like that.
Now, I'm not going to ask you any more about this report, but I'm
Okay.
going to ask you about
That's a good thing.
why
Get
one
you in
might expect to
trouble.
find less amount of ethylene glycol in a homicide rather than as opposed to a suicide. And you can answer that without looking at this report and referring to this report.
Okay.
You knew that before you did this report, right?
Yes.
So we're ready to proceed then, Your Honor.
Can I ask some questions about this report?
I think we should allow you to answer. I don't have a problem with that, Your Honor.
Dr. Mainland, did you receive these autopsy reports in these cases?
Yes.
And you have those?
I have some of them.
Not all of them?
Not all of them.
I'd move for production of the ones that she has, for one.
Well, first, let's find out where are they?
They're the ones from Milwaukee and Waukesha. I basically took notes from the cases, so I did not copy any part of the case file. I have a few
Probably a
from
good
Tampa.
good
Do you have them
thing.
here, or do you have them back in Tampa?
I have a few from Tampa, I believe, with me. Hang on.
I have no objection, Your Honor, to her producing the stuff that she has. I just want to know what she had with her and what she did.
Defense might.
Whatever she has, we can produce.
I'll wait while you look.
Yeah. Make us wait.
Yeah, the one, two, three. I have 5 cases here from Tampa.
Just wait. The reporter's plugging your
Oh,
machine in.
sorry.
Uh-huh.
All right, I have 5 case reports here from Tampa, and then the rest of what I have is
Why do they
handwritten
still have
notes
these
taken
plastic
from,
screens up?
case files in
So
Milwaukee and Waukesha.
ridiculous.
And Kenosha.
I'd request that, would you have a problem with making copies of those and providing you with the originals back?
Nope.
Okay, Your Honor, request that the bailiff make 2 copies. And are these marked as exhibits, Counselor?
I don't know if they can be.
Just do 2 copies and you can make a decision.
And maybe we should wait for the copying until I'm done asking questions in case there's
That's
more.
how you want to proceed? Go ahead.
Mhm.
Do you have, are you able to look at these numbers with the records that you have and tell me where each one of these is from and the date of death?
Yes, I only have, as I said, 5 records with me. Actually, some of the notes, I think I can tell you the date of death.
Okay, did you receive these autopsy reports and toxicology results? Did you receive those electronically from people?
I probably looked at them physically.
They were mailed to you.
No. I did this a while ago while I still had access, physical access in Milwaukee.
Uh-huh.
You did this while you were working in Milwaukee?
No, but I was able to go and look at cases.
Okay, before you moved to Florida.
Yes, I believe so.
Do you have the sources for who made the determinations that these were a suicide, an accident, or undetermined?
No, I don't have the physician's name.
Do you have the reports that accompany them to support how they came to that conclusion?
No.
You just have
Just the 5.
for 5 of them.
Yeah.
And for those 5, you don't have the things I just asked you about.
For the 5, I have the physician's determination of cause and manner. I have the initial investigative report, and then I have the toxicology report.
Do you know which on this list, which 5?
Yeah, the 5 from Tampa. Let's see. It would be 2 of the undetermined. Hang on.
Uh-huh.
1.
So this could have been marked down as undetermined.
It's me from Tampa.
Right. Which one's on this list, please?
The 2 undetermined. Well, you see that, and they're just 2 of them. The suicides. Hang on. None detected. One was 460 milligrams per deciliter. That's 4,600 milligrams per liter. And the last one, 930 milligrams per liter.
And the rest you have no details on with you,
I don't have any. All I have is my notes with amounts.
which is really just reflected on this the sheet.
Correct.
So no supporting documentation.
I have, well, only my notes. I have notes as to day of death and a little bit about the circumstances,
Okay,
et cetera.
There are 21, if I can
Right.
do addition, there are 21 different things listed on here, right?
Yes.
And you can tell us, you have details about 5 of them, right?
Yeah, I mean, official detail, yes.
I thought you testified at the start. I thought when this you were first explaining this, that you compared suicides, accidents, undetermined, and homicides. Was homicides
yes.
a category that you had compared?
I did, but the homicides were those are from public knowledge. I have, fewer toxicology reports.
And those aren't on this list.
No, they aren't. I don't know of any other ethylene glycol homicides either from here or down in Tampa, which is where I pulled this stuff from.
Aside from your opinion about this particular case,
Correct.
that's the only ethylene glycol homicide that you think exists, that you're aware of.
In this area, yes.
Okay, so in terms of comparing your study, comparing ethylene glycol fatalities of what's seen in a suicide and what's seen in a homicide, on the suicide list, you have 15,
Yes.
and your homicide list, which isn't on here, would be 1.
Yeah, actually, there are I don't have amounts for most of them.
You don't know the amounts?
No.
Okay. That's all I have. I think it's there's a separate objection just simply to relevance in terms of the
That's a different objection.
It's a different objection. It's not coming in anyway right now.
Right.
I would still ask for production of those notes at this time, though.
We'll have the,
Your Honor, I will just say this. First of all, I think it should come in now because now they've been provided the report. They've actually been able to cross-examine the witness about the report. They've had plenty of opportunity to discuss the report. So now the report should come in. This is normally what happens. Instead of evidence just being
Yeah.
excluded, the court will give the opposing party the opportunity to voir dire the witness, and that's what they've just done. They've voir dire the witness. So now this report, her testimony about this should be admissible.
Well, let's go make the copy. Yeah, let's.
Now you see why he did it. You
I mean,
see why he did it.
It is Exhibit 90, right? Is that
They're trying to get this stuff brought in.
As you can see, it's not a report, Your Honor. It's just a list of her
I'm
notes.
going to correct
They're
myself.
working the way
It is what I
around to
would
get it
consider
brought in.
Written summary, and it's pretty small.
And
I don't want to say this is extensive, but it's pretty small.
in terms of her conclusions from it and her opinion based on this list and the list of the 5 examples that I don't have yet, and all of the other limitations to this, I think the reason that statute 971.23 talks about a reasonable amount of time before trial and gives actual deadlines for expert summaries, expert reports, is for it's logical, right? We have experts in this case that we would consult with, and we would, in order to cross-examine Dr. Mainland on this, have an opportunity to find out, okay, well, what are the stats that would compare to be able to effectively cross-examine on this? And so finding out the details of her notes of, which we don't actually have at this moment yet, of really 5 cases, and then her just numbers listed for 21 different cases, is not within the meaning of that statute a reasonable amount of time before trial. And so I would maintain the objection that I thought had been sustained.
Well, it had been sustained. I'm not disputing the fact that the court had sufficient grounds at the time you sustained the objection. What I'm saying is that there are 2 potential remedies when there's been this kind of what I would call an inadvertent discovery violation. It was my fault. It wasn't Dr. Mainland's fault, and she told me about this yesterday. And when I got it, I guess I should have immediately notified defense counsel. And I
Yes.
just forgot to do that. But one of the other options, instead of excluding the evidence, is to allow
Wait a
the
minute.
defense or the
Hey,
opposing
Darth.
party to voir dire the witness, and that's what's happened here. So I think now the stuff that defense counsel's raised here goes to weight, doesn't go to admissibility, and I think that it should be admitted.
Wouldn't you think it would be beneficial to the defense's expert witnesses to have this information prior to today's cross-examination?
Well, you mean so they could then consult with the defense attorneys about it?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it probably would be right.
I think it'd be pretty beneficial. So it's not coming in on direct.
There you
Bring
go.
the jury back.
Did we get those copies back yet?
I think he's still working on it. You got to slow me down sometimes.
Okay, so you're telling him not to bring back the
What's
jury.
I know. That's why you got to slow me down.
So, so we're not bringing the jury yet, sir.
We need the copies
What's
first.
up? What's up? What's up?
You heard.
Well, sometimes you got to have them around here, keep you under control. Oh. I hope they do. Oh, you guys are fun.
All rise for the jury.
All right, we're back on the record. Mark D. Jensen, 2002 CF 314. The appearances are the same. The jury's back in the courtroom. Dr. Mainland is still on the stand under oath. I just want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there was some question about comparative studies of homicide and suicide. We're not going to get there right now, so disregard all that. Whatever was said is stricken from the record. So you can continue now, Mr. Jim.
So, Dr. Mainland, let's talk about ethylene glycol as an instrument of death. Okay, it is effective as an instrument of death, is it not?
Yes.
What happens to a dog if it happens across a bowl of ethylene glycol on the ground and it drinks up the bowl of ethylene glycol?
It dies
And why would a dog drink ethylene glycol?
because it tastes good.
Now, at the last hearing, I had you taste some antifreeze, did I not?
Yes, you did.
I'm not going to ask you to do that again. You spit it out right if you tasted it, right?
Yes.
But how did it taste?
It was sweet.
So ethylene glycol itself has a sweet taste to it.
Yes, it does.
But antifreeze, which contains ethylene glycol, contains other things as well, doesn't it?
Yes.
What are the other things
Yes.
that it contains?
I believe propylene glycol, and nowadays they add a bittering agent to it.
But in 1998 they didn't.
Not here.
So, but there were other additives like things to prevent the engine block from getting rusty and things like that, rust inhibitors and that sort of thing.
I can't remember all that. I don't know all the chemical names.
But you knew how it tested when you, or how it tasted when you.
Oh, but
tested
she
it,
knows all the
in back in
chemical
2008.
names that were
Yes.
in the other
and it tasted
stuff.
sweet.
Yes,
And that's what would cause dogs possibly to drink it or found it on the ground.
possibly.
And sometimes children would drink ethylene glycol, right?
Yes.
And it'd be an accidental injection of ethylene glycol.
Yes.
And they get very sick.
Yes.
And sometimes they survived and sometimes they didn't.
Yes.
And then there are people who ingest ethylene glycol because they want to commit suicide.
Yes.
And then there are other people who select ethylene glycol as a means of committing murder.
Yes.
So let's talk about what kind
Yes,
of research one would
he
find on the internet.
did.
If you're looking at
Prosecution's
potential ways of
horrible.
killing your spouse, what would you find about ethylene glycol?
Well, you'd find a number of the things that we talk about. You'd find about the effects and et cetera. You'd also find that it's not usually tested for at autopsy.
And
So from a
tell
potential
them
murderer's
why
perspective,
it's
that
not
makes it an
usually
attractive vehicle
tested
to kill
for.
one's spouse.
Yes,
It's sweet tasting and it's not typically detected at autopsy.
that's correct.
Now, in the literature, if you go online and you look up ethylene glycol as a toxic substance, has
What
the
about
literature that
a
was available
non-toxic
to indicate what the
substance?
typical lethal amount of ethylene glycol would be?
It depends. The most common number you'll see in the literature is 100 milliliters. That's an old figure that was taken from dogs in the 1930s. It's been shown that as little as 30 milliliters can kill a person.
To give the jury an idea of what 30 milliliters look like, I'm going to ask you to take a look at this.
Does this rag smell like chloroform to you? That's pretty good.
So that's a small dosing cup that came with my NyQuil. And how many different variations or demarcations are there on that?
There are two lines. The first one marks 15 milliliters, and the second one, closer to the top, marks 30
You can hold up to the jury
milliliters.
so the jury can see it. So 30 milliliters is just a little bit less than what's contained, what would be held in that cup.
Correct.
And is that the amount that you're holding there in your hand that would fit in that cup? Would that be a sufficient amount of ethylene glycol to cause the symptoms that Julie Jensen was manifesting?
Yes.
Would it be sufficient to cause the oxalic acid crystals that were found in her system?
Yes.
The amount of ethylene glycol was found in her blood and her gastric contents and
Yes.
her urine?
Yes.
But that amount of ethylene glycol, that small amount, 30 milligrams or milliliters, 30 milliliters, would that be likely to cause her death very quickly, or would it be likely to cause her death over a longer period of time?
Every individual is different, but the symptoms are the severity of the symptoms will kind of depend on the dose. Well, not the severity, the manifestation. A person could survive. I'm sorry. Repeat your question, please. I got off track.
Okay, well, let's start with this. You read Aaron Dillard's letter to his attorney, where he indicated that Mark Jensen had provided Julie with 2 doses of ethylene glycol.
Yes.
So hold up that cup, and you said that would be sufficient all at once to kill her, correct?
Yes.
So 2 doses of half that amount would be enough to kill her?
Probably.
So hold up show the jury where the 15 milliliter line is.
Right where my fingertip is.
And so that's a very small amount of ethylene glycol.
Yes.
If we're mixed in with a cup of orange juice or some kind of a juice, it might not be noticed.
Might not.
And if you're gonna
Just
somebody
make the
with ethylene
juice
glycol, you don't want to
sweeter,
taste it on
that's
the way out,
all.
right?
Probably not.
On the other hand, if you're going to commit suicide with ethylene glycol, you just gulp it all down.
Back to foundation.
Why don't you just lay a foundation answer that question?
Well, if a person's going to commit suicide with ethylene glycol, they want to die from ingesting ethylene glycol. Is that right?
Right.
So what are they likely going to do if they want to die from ingesting ethylene glycol?
Drink enough of it.
To kill them
Yes.
all at once.
Yes.
Let's talk about the process of dying from ethylene glycol poisoning. You described the stages, but can you describe the level of suffering that a person who's dying from ethylene glycol, describe to the jury the level of suffering that Julie Jensen went through in the last 2 days of her life?
Especially the second and third phases of ethylene glycol poisoning. The second phase, where glycolic acid is being produced and the body is becoming acidotic, is very uncomfortable. I was describing how hard and deeply the person is trying to breathe.
So she was there watching him breathe.
There could be some depression of the nervous system as well. First stage could cause even seizures. By the third stage, you can get pain, a lot of pain. That would involve the crystals building up in the kidneys. So you get pain from that. You would just feel miserable. I guess I could compare it to a bad flu. You would feel generally weak and miserable.
Oh, Jesus.
So one
Come
large
on.
dose
Get
would
with it,
shorten
woman.
the agony and the misery, and multiple small doses would prolong the agony and the misery.
Yes.
So if a person's committing suicide, most people who commit suicide don't want to suffer; they just want to die, right?
In my experience.
So ingesting multiple small doses of antifreeze is more horrific way to die than ingesting one large dose of ethylene glycol.
I would say so.
On the other hand, it's hard to get somebody to ingest a large amount of ethylene glycol unwittingly.
Objection foundation.
Overall, go ahead. You can answer.
Well, I'll back up. You tasted ethylene glycol, right?
Yes.
It was a sweet tasting substance.
Yes.
But there were other tastes to it that were not so pleasant.
Yeah. There were. Yes.
I mean, you've had orange juice,
Yes.
and you like the taste of orange juice.
Yes, I do.
You don't like the taste of ethylene glycol that you're secretly hankering for more ethylene glycol, right?
No, I have not.
It doesn't taste as good as orange juice, does it?
No, it does not.
So if you wanted somebody to ingest ethylene glycol, and you're going to spike their orange juice with it, you put in a little bit of ethylene glycol and a lot of orange juice.
That would help to disguise it. Yes.
So 2 small doses is consistent with homicide, but inconsistent with suicide.
Yes.
And the information that you have concerning the last 2 days of Julie's death, or Julie's life, I should say, the last 2 days that Julie was alive, Is that more consistent with 2 small doses or 1 large dose?
It's more consistent with multiple doses.
And that's consistent with what Aaron Dillard's indicated Mark Jensen confessed to him.
Yes.
Now, it is true that it's unusual for a murder suspect to confess to a fellow inmate, isn't it?
I wouldn't know.
It's also unusual for one guy to get drunk and tell another guy that he's thinking about that he's planning to murder his wife.
Men say a lot of things when they're drunk, but I don't think that many men talk about murdering their wives.
But in this case, you're aware that there was evidence that Mark Jensen told Ed Klug that he was planning to murder his wife.
Yes.
And he's planning to murder her with a drug that crystallized her from the inside out.
Yes.
And is that a pretty fair description of what ethylene glycol does to you?
That would be a good layman's description. Yes.
Crystallizes you from the inside out, right?
Yes.
Now, and after Ed Klug came forward, you're aware that Mark Jensen undertook a conspiracy with a fellow inmate to try to have Ed Klug done away with before the trial, correct?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
And you weren't aware of that before the forfeiture hearing, but you were aware of that, I'm sorry, the first hearing, but you were aware of that before the second hearing, correct?
Yes.
Yes, I agree with you. Definitely, Grim. I do agree with you.
So, Doctor, just to complete this line of questioning, as you're sitting here today, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to the cause and manner of death of Julie Jensen?
Yes.
What was the cause of her death?
Ethylene glycol poisoning with probable terminal asphyxia.
And what was the manner of death?
Homicide.
With probable
Nothing further.
terminal.
I take it, Mr. Perry, you're doing the cross?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Judge.
This is going to be short.
Dr. Mainland, when you started this morning, you were explaining your kind of qualifications for going through your CV, right?
Yes.
And you started from the beginning with was it residency?
Medical school.
Yeah, and then fellowships.
Yes.
And your experience, you talked about, you added up over the years and the averages for the years, but you ballparked it as doing about 4,000 autopsies.
That's correct.
And that's up until your retirement a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And you indicated since retirement, you've done some consulting.
Yes.
Who do you consult with?
Well, I did it. I had a part-time job. I worked for LifeLink of Florida, where I reviewed cases in which tissue was to be donated. I did that for a while. I have another case with Mr. Jamboys.
Go figure.
That's about it, really.
Was that referred to you after your retirement?
Yes.
And that was for you to review records and see what had been done?
Yes.
And that's something you're doing just for private pay?
Yes.
Have you ever treated live patients,
Only in medical school.
like when you're doing rotations,
Yes.
but never after you graduated from medical school?
No. Unless you need to discount my family.
You've, setting aside any rotation you did while in medical school, I guess I'll refer to your professional career.
Okay.
You've never dealt with patients who are alive and depressed.
No.
I guess I could have broken that up. You've never dealt with patients who are alive.
She's nervous.
Actually, yes, I have,
You have?
but few and far between.
Okay. You don't prescribe medications unless it's to your family.
No.
You're not a forensic psychiatrist.
No, I'm not.
What's a forensic psychiatrist?
A forensic psychiatrist is the same thing as not same thing, similar work to a forensic pathologist. The psychiatrist will look back at a deceased person's psychiatric history and try to determine what was going on with them, make diagnoses, etc. So I guess they're also employed looking at living individuals as well.
Okay. You've never treated somebody who's ingested ethylene glycol.
No.
Now, Julie Jensen died in December 3rd of 1998, right?
Yes.
Dr. Chambliss did the autopsy on December 4th, 1998.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that he did was then turned over to the Kenosha medical examiner.
Yes.
And that person was not you.
No.
You became the medical examiner in Kenosha in 2005.
Yes.
You stayed in that position until 2008.
Yes.
So what your role was, it sounds, correct me if I'm wrong, similar to the consulting work you're doing now.
That's correct.
So you were reviewing an autopsy done by somebody else.
Yes.
You're reviewing samples that were taken by somebody else,
Yes.
looking at photographs taken by somebody else.
Yes.
And you're piecing through the reports that have been provided to you, and you're trying to come up with something that the most consistent explanation that makes sense to you, right?
Yes.
And that's when you testify and you say the words a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that's what that really means, isn't it?
Yes.
Is this is what makes sense to you considering everything you've looked at.
Yes. You can call it an opinion.
Okay. To do your job, you need reliable information,
Yes.
and it needs to be credible.
Yes.
Prior to today, did you review all your prior testimony in this case?
Very briefly.
God.
You testified and directly reviewed the autopsy report.
Yes.
This woman.
You usually take the photos when you do autopsies?
I take a lot of my own photos. Others do not.
I'm sure she's an
Some,
OnlyFans girl.
Some rely on
Takes
autopsy
her own
technicians.
photos.
Some rely on law enforcement.
And the reason you take photos yourself is you want to be sure that you're photographing what you want photographed.
Yes.
I told you,
Can be,
OnlyFans
it's
girl.
part of the whole report, essentially, right?
Yes.
You wouldn't want to, I guess you aren't doing autopsies anymore. It's a bad question. But you don't want to find out when film got developed that the picture didn't capture exactly what you wanted.
Of course not.
And film hasn't been used in a long time, right?
Since
Only
well, I used
grams.
it in 2000, but it's been quite a while.
Okay, and then everything went digital.
Yes.
And in this case, these were film photographs,
I believe so.
and they were film photographs taken by Detective Ratsburg.
I'm not sure who took them, but I'll take your word.
Do you still have the autopsy report in front of you?
Yes.
It was a paper copy was given to you this morning, right?
Yes.
Would if you were to look at top third of page 1, would that refresh your recollection?
Yes. You're talking about.
Right above the word personal effects.
I see that. Yes.
Yeah, and it says photographs are taken by Sergeant Ratsburg of the Pleasant Prairie Police Department.
Okay.
His
I believe
name
that,
is Ratsburger. They spelled it out Rats
Would you agree that
Burger.
it's the standard to take photos before incision?
Yes.
And the reason you want to do that is to document the state of the body as it's received by you prior to doing the autopsy.
Yes.
Any external findings would want to be documented.
Yes.
You haven't seen any pictures like that in this case, have you?
No, I haven't.
You're not aware that any external preliminary photos were taken at autopsy.
Not at autopsy.
Weird, huh?
And so when you're doing kind of your review of the work that's been done, a limitation is the work that's been done, right?
Of course.
And the quality of that work.
Yes.
How long does an autopsy typically take?
It depends. A really simple autopsy can be completed in an hour. Depending on the findings, depending on the type of case. Multiple gunshot wound case can take days.
In all of your years of doing autopsies as a forensic pathologist, have you ever done an autopsy and then just turned it over to somebody else?
No.
And the 4,000 autopsies you've done, you've then done the investigative part of it and sent things for samples and done the follow-up work.
Yeah, but we do obviously have investigative staff, but I reviewed all their work product.
Okay. And in this
together.
case, I'm sorry,
Yeah, I reviewed their work product and put it together with the other things that you mentioned.
by your staff.
Yes.
Okay. And in this case, you're understanding that Dr. Chambliss did the autopsy and then turned it over,
Yes.
and he didn't do any additional follow-up.
I'm not aware of it.
And he was the Waukesha medical examiner at the time, right?
I think so. Yes.
I want to talk about that autopsy report, which is marked, I think, as Exhibit S. It's part of S10, I believe. And that's you have that in front of you.
Oh, come on. Bring it on.
And it describes the condition of Julie Jensen as of December 4th, 1998, right?
Yes.
That she weighed 110 pounds.
Approximately.
Okay. Would you,
That you
think
looked
that
it up.
Think
That's
after this
scary.
was done would have had a scale?
I really don't know.
Would it be in the 4,000 autopsies you've done? You weighed about
I feel for you, Grant.
All of my autopsies, except those I've done in Kenosha County, I did not have a scale.
Kenosha County doesn't have a scale.
They did not at the time.
Well, presumably she was weighed, right?
Objection calls for speculation. Just by the word presumably.
Sustained.
It's in Dr. Chambliss's report, isn't it?
There is
The question is vague. What is in Dr. Chambliss's report?
It's a follow-up question about how much Julie Jensen weighed.
Well, we know the report says 110 pounds. Let's move on.
Actually, it says approximately 110 pounds.
Approximately. Thank you for correcting it.
Nah.
It notes only blunt trauma injuries are minor and few. You see that on page 1?
yes.
Blunt trauma
And at the time
histories.
the body was discovered, there was little or no rigor. Legs and neck and body still slightly warm. Do you see that?
I'm looking for that. Which page is that on? Okay, I see it.
Did I read that correctly?
Yes. Mhm.
You said what? I'm sorry. What did you say?
On page 1.
On page 1.
Now, that'd be consistent with her dying approximately 3 hours earlier, correct?
It could be yes.
So if there was testimony that a first responder was at 4:35 p.m., would you ballpark her time of death as 1:35 to 2:35 p.m.?
It's again a very ballpark figure, but yes, it could be.
That'd be reasonable considering the description of her body at the time she was found.
Yes.
Do you see the spot in the autopsy where it notes the hemorrhage of the mucosa of the hypopharyngeal muscles on the upper back of the thyroid cartilage of the larynx near the aeroglottic folds? How did I do?
Not bad. Area epiglottic.
Areoglottic. Okay.
I'm looking for it. I recall reading that. I'm looking for it.
It's if you look at page 4 under gastrointestinal system,
Okay, I see it.
and it says there's a hemorrhage of that mucosa, right?
Yes.
That's something that is not an infrequent finding, correct?
That's correct.
That could be entirely post-mortem artifact.
It could be yes.
Can you explain what post-mortem artifact means?
Sometimes a body after death would look as though something could look as though it's an injury, but it's not. That's the simplest way to put it.
Could happen just as part of the dying process, right?
Yes.
This description
Yes.
doesn't mean that a person was struck.
No, not necessarily.
You could die of a heart attack and have that.
Yes.
There isn't a photo that adequately shows what this is there?
There is, yes.
Is there a description or photo enough for you to make a decision about the cause of that?
In this case, it was not.
Okay. That finding, based on the autopsy, doesn't reveal a whole lot, does it?
No.
I want to talk about on that same page under cardiovascular system at the top, you see that?
Yes.
It notes there's petechiae in the lung and pericardial sac.
Yes.
Can you explain what petechiae are?
Petechiae are, it's just a doctor word for tiny little hemorrhages, almost rash looking, just tiny little pinpoint hemorrhages.
And you can see those anywhere, right?
Yes,
Anywhere in the body,
pretty much so, yes.
living or dead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there anything suspicious about there being petechiae in the lung and pericardial sac?
Possibly, not always.
It doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Correct. It could be a post-mortem artifact.
Oh, that could be something that just truly just shows up after somebody's died.
Yes,
Yep, that's what I said the other day.
fairly.
And the pattern that these are described in, that's consistent with what you just said, right?
That is a probable post-mortem artifact
Yes.
or peri-mortem. It could be, yes.
A heart attack can cause petechiae.
Probably.
Straining,
Yes,
and nothing even discernible can cause petechiae.
that's true.
Throwing up,
Find the right page.
hurling.
On page 3, under internal examination, under neck organs. Tell me if you see that. Organs.
Okay,
It notes that the small and large strap muscles show no sign of injury.
correct.
Can you explain what the large and small strap areas of the neck are?
Yes, there are muscles, talking to the microphone, there are muscles that run down underneath the skin, run down the front of your neck. Guys can tense that up and see the shaving muscle, they call it. And then there are other deeper ones that run down either from your, from like the top of your throat or from your larynx down to your sternum, basically.
Okay. And you might find an injury there if somebody had been strangled. Right?
Yes,
Grim.
There's no indication of that in this case.
no,
There'd be
She's
evidence of injury and
practicing for
strangulation
her
because there'd be
only
pressure on those
grands.
muscles, right?
Just
Yes.
for you.
Same section. You see where it says the mucosa of the larynx is normal.
yes,
The cartilages of the larynx are normal.
yes,
The hyoid bone is intact.
yes,
You might see damage to that area if there was pressure on the neck, right?
yes,
In this case, there's no damage to that area.
no,
Talk quite a bit indirect about the gastric contents. The report doesn't actually indicate that gastric contents were collected, does it?
no, it doesn't.
It gives a description of the gastric contents.
Yes,
It indicates that there were about 660 milliliters, right?
correct.
And I think it described that it contained what Dr. Chambliss described as potatoes and pepper.
Correct.
Have you ever examined the gastric contents?
No,
I want to walk through a little bit of measurements in this case because there's been a lot of discussion about that.
I'm sure there
I can
was.
just skip to the end. Do you agree that 660 milliliters is about 22 ounces?
sounds about right.
You testified that the toxicology report indicated that there were 3,940 micrograms per milliliter of ethylene glycol in that stomach.
Yes,
Yeah,
A microgram
exactly.
is 1/1,000,000th of a gram, correct?
microgram, yes,
3,940 micrograms per milliliter. If we were to multiply that by 660, we would get 2,600,400 micrograms per 660 milliliters. Does that sound right?
yes,
That's the equivalent of 2.6 grams,
correct.
which is the equivalent of about 1/10 of an ounce.
You're making me do math on the fly. I read that, yes.
A teaspoon is 0.166 ounces. Sound right?
So 2
Sounds reasonable, yes.
teaspoons.
This is about 2.6 grams of ethylene glycol is about half a teaspoon.
Yes,
Okay. So out of the 22 ounces of stuff in Julie Jensen's stomach, about half a teaspoon of it was ethylene glycol, according to this. right?
So
That's correct.
maybe it was such a small amount that it didn't matter. Maybe
The
she
autopsy
ate some
report notes that
lipstick.
the stomach was distended.
yes,
That could suggest that the stomach was not emptying properly, correct?
it's possible, yes.
And if the stomach had stopped emptying, that could extend the amount of time that ethylene glycol in her gastric contents would be absorbed into her system,
Yes,
beyond what you might typically expect with the absorption of ethylene glycol.
yes,
Because what you typically expect with the absorption of ethylene glycol is what you typically expect in a correctly functioning GI system, right?
Yes.
And there's indication that Julie Jensen's GI system was not functioning the way it should be.
At least at the time of death.
Now, gastric emptying time is variable in individuals.
Yes.
We have no idea about Julie Jensen's gastric emptying time.
Correct.
Was she clogged up? That's what he's asking.
Gastroparesis is when the stomach doesn't empty properly for any number of reasons. Agreed?
Yes.
And that's a pretty common thing to occur even in healthy individuals.
I'm not sure how common it is, but I mean, it's
It's
knowledge.
called constipation.
Properly functioning kidneys, one of their jobs is to eliminate nitrogen wastes from the body, right?
Yes.
And if that's not happening, then something called uremia can develop.
Yes.
And that uremia is really just the buildup of nitrogen waste in the body.
Yes, basically.
That's something that can cause gastroparesis.
Yes.
An electrolyte imbalance, kind of the acid-base status, is something that can affect GI motility.
I would imagine so, yes.
Yeah, also meaning that can cause gastroparesis.
Probably, yes.
Now, for something to be absorbed through the lining of the stomach, that something needs to come in contact with the lining of the stomach, correct?
Yes.
Our intestinal tract has absorptive cells.
Yes.
Now, peristalsis, did I say that right?
Yeah, good job.
Thank you. Is the grinding up of the food, liquid, everything that's in the gut, mixing it with digestive enzymes, and puts it into contact with those absorptive cells.
Correct.
Now, when there's gastroparesis, that's breaking down. That system isn't working, right?
Correct.
To know whether the half a teaspoon out of the 22 ounces would have come in contact with the lining of Julie Jensen's stomach, with those absorptive cells, we really need to know what the other 22 ounces are, right?
I'm not sure how that would make a difference.
Well, if it's if the 22 ounces is just clear water, that's different than 22 ounces of sludgy food, right?
Okay, I understand now what you're getting at. Yes.
Yeah, you'd agree with that then?
Yes.
That to assess the
Now
likelihood
she's getting it.
or unlikelihood of what was going on with that half a teaspoon, we really need to know the makeup of those 22 ounces.
Yes, that'd be helpful.
And we don't know that, right?
This is the
We know
defense.
some about it, but not. We don't have the chemical composition.
This
we
is
know-
the defense.
We know the texture, the color, etc.
We know the color and we know that it, the description from the person doing the autopsy is that it contained potatoes and pepper.
Correct.
I think you testified on direct about somebody who is acidotic.
Yes.
Now, the human body,
Although the
maintains
prosecution was
slightly
doing it
acidic
also.
acid-base status, right?
Yes.
For somebody who's healthy, it's around 7.4.
Approximately. Yes.
And when you go below 7, that's an acid, right?
Yes.
Now, if there's too much acid, that's toxic to the cells in the human body, right?
Yes.
And Julie Jensen was necessarily acidotic, wasn't she?
Yes.
And we know that because she was
No, this
actively
attorney's pretty good.
processing ethylene glycol.
Yes.
And
Yes,
the
he
metabolism of ethylene glycol breaks down into those acids that you talked about,
Yes.
the oxalic acid and then the glycolic acid.
Correct. Among others.
And is there any way for a body that's processing ethylene glycol to not be acidotic?
If there's a significant amount of ethylene glycol, probably not.
And that's something that we talked about, that electrolyte imbalance is something that can delay gastric emptying.
Yes.
The autopsy report indicates that the urinary bladder was distended with 150 cc's of urine.
Yes.
That's a pretty typical amount for somebody to die with.
Yes, it is.
You have an indication that Julie Jensen was drinking a lot of water,
Yes.
Uh-huh.
and you referenced looking at scene photos and descriptions of the scene, right?
Yes.
There's no indication that any bodily fluids were found in the bed.
Not to my knowledge.
That would suggest that she was able to get up and go to the bathroom, wouldn't it?
Either that or she simply wasn't going.
Okay.
Or someone helped her.
Those three options,
I don't know.
Correct.
but it was a typical
Don't know
amount
at all.
in a bladder.
Yes.
The small amount of soft tissue hemorrhage to the ribs.
Yes.
That's a non-specific finding, isn't it?
Yes.
That could just be congestion.
It could be, yes.
Can you explain what congestion is?
Congestion, excuse me. Congestion just means settling of blood. Settling or a collection of blood. That's all.
Is another way of saying that is that would that be postmortem lividity?
Yes.
So if laying face down with gravity, blood would pool correctly?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And that's something that that this might be.
Yes.
That's something that could have happened when the body was even moved.
I'm not sure about that.
You have no idea whether it's an injury, correct?
I can't say definitively that it is an injury.
And you don't know how long it had been there.
No, I don't.
Is that something that could be a postmortem artifact?
It could be.
And it could just be simply congestion of blood.
That's a possibility.
And you're aware that Julie Jensen was found face down.
Yes.
It could have been from bumping into something.
Kind of an odd place to get injured from bumping into something,
Somebody
Oh,
was,
maybe.
no.
in an intoxicated
That's
state.
speculation.
It could
Come
have
on.
been any number of things, right?
It's possible.
So it could be an injury, could not be an injury.
Correct.
Could have happened before death, could have happened after death.
I don't think it happened after death.
That's what postmortem finding is, right?
Yes.
Okay. The positioning of the arm in the photo, that
My
they
wife ends
thought
up
it was
with
an unnatural
odd
position.
bruises in
Yes.
the weirdest
You'd agree
places.
that people sleep in
Has
weird
no
ways.
idea
Yes,
how
they
she
do.
got them.
And when people are on their side, an arm has to go somewhere, doesn't it?
Yes. At least one of them.
The report notes bruises on the right buttock.
Yes.
That's also not a specific finding, right?
That's correct.
That could happen from falling or running into a table.
Yes.
You'd have no idea from this description how old they are.
The description would indicate they're fairly fresh.
Could have been there for days.
Maybe a couple.
The bruise on the right shin, you saw that in the report.
Yes.
That means nothing to you, right?
That's correct.
That's also what you'd say is non-specific.
That's correct.
That could be from bumping into anything.
Correct.
Also, no idea how long that's been.
And I don't remember. Don't remember if you described the color.
It might have been, Grim. I saw that.
Yes.
The report notes a superficial yellow, slightly curved
Oh,
abrasion
that was
on the
good.
right side of the front of the neck.
Yes.
That's something that could be postmortem.
Yes.
That's something that could have happened before her death.
Yes. Shortly before.
It's described
I
from
understood
thought
what
as
it
by
was.
shape
That's
of a fingernail,
good.
right?
Yes.
Could have been caused by a fingernail.
Could have. Yes.
Could have been caused by not a fingernail.
Sure.
It's superficial, meaning there's no injury underneath it, right?
Correct.
That's something. I think I don't want to misstate what you just said. That could be postmortem, right?
Yes.
That could have happened from moving the body.
If somebody grabbed the body by the neck, I would imagine so.
If somebody moved the body and glanced the neck.
Possibly.
There were pictures at the scene when she had died.
One
that showed
hopes.
her eyes, right?
Yes.
You remember seeing those?
Yes.
That's something that doesn't strike you as significant in any way, right?
The description given by Dr. Chambliss, if that's a correct description, no, it does not. It's non-specific and common.
It doesn't mean anything to you based on his description.
Correct.
And we kind of have
There
to go
you
with his
go.
description, right?
Right.
The same scene photos showed her nose.
Yes.
Now,
Well, from what I understand,
not
he
uncommon
wasn't
for
too
people to
happy
die
with
face
her. So
Yeah,
just saying,
and
he
you
had
die
plenty
face
of
down,
motive.
you have the weight of your head on your nose, right?
Yes.
Cartilage is pretty pliable.
Yes.
Not unusual for a nose to be pushed to one side.
No.
By the time of the autopsy, it indicated that the nose was midline,
Yes.
no damage at all.
None was described. No.
I want to shift to, well, Judge, I'll ask you this. I'm going to shift to a new topic.
And let me just ask you, how long is your cross going to be as of right now? How much more do you need?
I suspect at least an hour.
All right. And you're going into a new topic?
I am.
I think it's a great time to stop.
All right,
15
here we
folks, I'll
go.
talk about the case.
Don't talk about the case. We're going to take a break, and we're going to skip forward because there's no point in sitting there watching this silly prosecution, silly defense. They'll get to it eventually. Can't believe that the prosecution had over 140 witnesses that they planned on calling. Everything
Mark D.
from
Jensen, 2002
criminals
CF314.
to,
The appearance
you
is
know,
the same. Dr. Malin is still on the
doctors
stand.
like
Continue with the
this.
Cross-examination. Anytime you're ready, Attorney Perry.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Mainland, ethylene
Well, I'm the
glycol
judge.
is a non-volatile substance, correct?
It's I think it's lowly volatile.
Lowly.
It's relatively non-volatile.
And what that
Yeah.
means is that it doesn't evaporate easily, right?
Right.
Does it mean anything other than that?
Not to me.
Okay, not to me either. You talked about the phases. You talked about the phases of ethylene glycol poisoning on direct, and there, the theory is that there are three of them, right?
Yes.
And now this three-stage theory has existed for a long time.
Yes.
A limitation in understanding the phases of ethylene glycol poisoning is the reliability of information about somebody who's been poisoned by ethylene glycol. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
When somebody shows up at a hospital and they've ingested ethylene glycol, they might not be the most reliable source for exactly when, how much, all of the factors, correct?
That's correct.
Oh,
They may
if they're
not.
trying to eat themselves, probably not.
All the literature, that limitation is present, isn't it?
Not all of it. There are some accurate reports, but I would say in general, yes.
To extrapolate in terms of how everybody would process ethylene glycol, it's a limitation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure. Well, I'm not
Come
quite sure what you
on,
mean.
say
You
it.
gotta-
I think
yeah.
today,
Yes.
every individual is different.
Yes.
And I guess what I'm getting at is issues with metabolization.
Okay.
And then how these different phases might manifest in any particular person.
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
That it's not a I guess, a strict recipe in terms of what happens when any one person ingests ethylene glycol.
Okay, that correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
I think a quote that is present in the literature and has been for a long time is that metabolism of ethylene glycol has not been thoroughly investigated in man.
That's correct.
And it hasn't been because it's poisonous.
That's correct.
Okay? And aside from you drinking ethylene glycol on the stand, most people don't do that.
I didn't swallow it.
Okay. There are these 3 phases, right? That's the theoretical 3 phases.
Right.
Okay. Stage 1 is thought to begin with a range anywhere from 30 minutes to 12 hours after ingestion.
Yes.
That's the intoxication phase.
Yes.
Stage 2, thought to begin 12 to 24 hours after ingestion.
Yes.
Cardiorespiratory phase.
Correct.
Now, the reason there's a cardiorespiratory phase is that goes back to that sort of acid base level that the human body needs to be at, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so if we need to be, the healthy individual needs to be at a 7.4 pH, right?
Right.
Once ethylene glycol starts getting metabolized and it turns into those acids, correct?
She
Yes.
just bites
And
down
The
or
heavy
gums
breathing,
it
the
to
rapid
death.
breathing, that's the body trying to get rid of the acid in the blood.
Yes.
And that would happen while a person is acidotic.
Yes.
That's where you see possible cardiac arrest,
Yes.
issues with just heart rate,
Yes.
and then labored breathing.
Yes.
As long as the body is acidotic, would you expect to see somebody in phase 2?
That's probably the description of phase 2. I'm not sure it has a strict definition, but phase 2 relates to the production of glycolic acid
I
and
guess what
acidosis.
I'm trying to understand is the logic with it, okay, and the explanation for it. So the heavy rapid breathing is because the body has become too acidic, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so it would stand to reason that as long as your the body is absorbing ethylene glycol, actively absorbing ethylene glycol in the blood, you would be acidotic.
As long as the body is metabolizing it.
Sure. And as long as it's being metabolized, it seems like you would probably be in that phase 2.
Yes, until you got through, until you metabolized all of the glycolic acid or whatever other acids were being produced.
Sure. So if you had unabsorbed ethylene glycol that was still being processed by the blood, it would seem like that would put you into phase 2.
If glycolic acid was being produced?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Then you talked about stage 3, and that's thought to begin, again, a really wide time frame, anywhere from 24 hours to 72 hours after ingestion.
Right.
And that's the renal phase.
Yes.
And that's the whole issue with the kidneys and kidneys shutting down.
Yes.
Okay. These stages can overlap, can't they?
Yes.
You may have a stage that's not clinically apparent.
That's correct.
A person could exhibit multiple phases at once.
That's correct.
And the reason that you could exhibit multiple phases at once is because when you ingest something, if a person were to ingest an alcohol, the gut doesn't immediately process all of it at once, right?
Right.
And that gets to kind of some of the stuff we talked about earlier with the GI motility.
Yes.
It gets to absorption in those absorptive cells.
Right.
It gets to a person's rate of metabolization.
Right.
Okay. And so it's not like the stomach isn't like a sink where you pull the drain and it all just goes into the bloodstream.
Not usually.
Right. And so if and you might see this or even experience it with drinking alcohol, right?
Experienced what?
This idea that all alcohol isn't absorbed simultaneously.
Correct.
Okay. You could get really drunk at night, not drink anymore, and still be drunk the next morning.
You could.
And is the logic that I'm explaining, is that
I've done that.
Is what consistent with that?
just that metabolization, rates of just GI motility, all of that would play a part.
Yes.
Genetics might play a part.
Possibly.
Genetics might play a part in terms of how a particular individual absorbs and processes alcohol.
I would imagine so. I mean, yes, I know some examples.
You can tell she's getting nervous because she's getting really close to the microphone where she almost is just about to
And while
swallow
we
it.
can't study while ethylene glycol can't be studied on people, there are lots of studies about how people
But as
process
Grim
alcohol,
says.
right?
Yes.
And
As Grim says.
the enzymes that metabolize alcohol would be the same enzymes processing ethylene glycol.
That's correct.
Would you agree that amongst comparing individual to individual, a person who's a chronic consumer of alcohol, that could result in the upregulation of those enzymes?
Yes.
That person would be able to metabolize alcohol faster than somebody who's not a chronic consumer of alcohol.
Yes.
And the reason they'd be able to do that faster than the person who doesn't drink alcohol is because the body has adjusted that P450 enzyme, right, to be able to do that.
Yes.
Okay. And so it would stand to reason if you were not a regular
She
drinker.
keeps looking over
you're
at the
likely not to metabolize
prosecution
alcohol
like,
as fast as
save
somebody
me.
who is a regular drinker.
Save me.
That's- Yes.
I'm getting hammered.
I think today you testified that, well, you testified about half-lives, right?
Yes.
And a half-life is Once
This is a video
once a
game.
substance reaches peak level in the blood, it starts being eliminated from the blood, correct?
Correct.
And then if a half-life is 4 hours, in 4 hours' time, you would have half of what was in there 4 hours before, right?
Right.
And then 4 hours later, it would be half of that.
Right.
And it's thought that 5 half-lives, when you do that 5 times, you're basically down to 0, correct?
Right.
Okay. And so if a half-life is 1 hour, you would expect that it would be out of your system within 5 hours, correct?
Right.
And if a half-life was 8 hours, you would expect it to be out of your system in 40 hours.
Yes.
The peak level for ethylene glycol, in terms of the literature, is estimated as being typically 1 to 4 hours after consumption.
Yes.
I think earlier today you gave the number of 1 hour.
I think 1 hour is what I've seen more commonly.
That's the low end of that range.
Okay. I mean, yes, I have seen 1 to 4 hours in the literature.
You're aware of cases in which the peak is reached after 4 hours.
Yes.
And it's not the ethylene glycol by itself that's fatal to a person, it's the metabolization of it.
That's correct.
So you could have, and you might frequently have, somebody who's died from ethylene glycol poisoning and their blood level at time of death would be 0.
Yes.
Yes. 5 to 20
The
hours
current
is a
reported
huge window.
half-life of ethylene glycol in an adult human being is estimated at being 3 to 8 hours. Would you agree with that?
I've seen 3 to 5 more commonly.
You've seen that in more textbooks,
Textbooks, literature.
and you've also seen 3 to 8.
I have seen that as well.
To know what Julie Jensen's half-life is, we'd have to know a lot of variables. Do you agree?
Yes.
We'd have to know, one, when precisely she ingested ethylene glycol.
Yes.
We'd have to know how much.
Yes.
And then, I mean, that would be a necessary, those would be necessary points to figure it out, right?
Well, we would have to know where the peak concentration is.
At what time the peak concentration was.
Correct.
And then there are all those variables in terms of her own P450 enzymes, right?
Right.
We don't know anything about that with her.
Not specifically, no.
We don't know what was happening with her gut on December 1st to December 3rd.
We know the way it ended up.
We do, in terms of her GI motility is what I'm talking about.
Right.
We don't know that.
No, we do know how it ended up. We don't know.
Oh, now she's trying to be a smart
All the
ass.
examples I gave of things that can cause gastroparesis, it would stand to reason that Julie Jensen was experiencing gastroparesis, wouldn't it?
Yes.
She had an electrolyte imbalance.
That wasn't proven, but I'm sure she did.
She had to have, right?
Right.
Her body was dealing with a toxin.
Yes.
You still have that little NyQuil cup of Mr. Jamboy's?
Yeah.
Yes.
30 milliliters is what you've testified to be the amount necessary to be fatal to Julie Jensen. Do
It could be, yes.
you think that's the bottom end of what's fatal to her?
I'm not quite sure.
Do you think 30 milliliters would be fatal to her?
Probably.
Somebody who weighed approximately 110 pounds at the time of death.
I would say probably between 30 and 50 mLs.
Why was she eating mice? 30 or 50 mice? That's a lot of mice.
The testing
I know.
showed
She said
that at the
Mel's.
time of death, she had unabsorbed ethylene glycol in her blood, correct?
It was absorbed because it was in her blood.
It was in her blood, but it was still being processed.
Right.
It had not yet. It's still in the process of being broken down into those metabolites.
Right.
In your work as a forensic pathologist,
Did they ever find
one of the manners
any
of death that you would
ethylene
consider suicide,
glycol
right?
Yes.
on him?
You would consider prior suicidal statements,
Yes.
prior attempts at suicide,
Yes.
anything indicating a suicidal ideation,
Yes.
and that would be like a comment to a doctor, a friend.
Anybody really?
You would consider a significant history of depression or mental illness.
Yes.
You would look to see whether or not a person had been diagnosed as being depressed.
Yes.
You would take weight loss into consideration.
Yes.
In this case, you reviewed Dr. Borman's notes. I think you mentioned on direct.
Yes.
And on September 21st, 1998, you note that Julie Jensen weighed 123.5 pounds, according to those notes.
Yes.
And then on December 1st, she weighed 115 pounds.
Yes, she
Yes.
did.
And then at the time of her death, it's estimated to be 110 pounds.
Yes.
Would you agree that depression and suicides can run in families?
It's been shown, yes.
It's understood that people frequently try to hide depression from people.
That's common.
The majority of people who commit suicide are suffering from depression.
I would agree with that.
You would consider whether or not a person's been treated for depression.
Yes.
And that treatment could include counseling.
Yes.
It could include medication.
Yes.
Paxil, or is paroxetine, right?
Yes.
There's an FDA warning on that classification of drug, isn't there?
Yes.
Here it comes.
It can cause
Told you.
someone
Gonna
initially
get
when
it.
they take the antidepressant to get dramatically worse initially.
Yes.
Another thing that can happen when people start taking an antidepressant is that they and start feeling the effect of it is that they can have the strength to take their own life where before they might not have.
That's correct.
There's a stigma about depression.
I would say so. Yes.
There's a stigma about suicidal ideations.
I would say so.
There are frequently consequences to reporting suicidal ideations.
Yes, it can be.
There are mandatory reporters,
Yes.
and that could lead to commitment.
Possibly.
Women with children have killed themselves.
Yes.
Would you agree that things can be counterintuitive with suicides?
Yes.
What might seem logical to somebody who's not depressed doesn't necessarily apply to somebody who is depressed.
Correct.
When you made an opinion in this case, in any of the times that you testified, you didn't have access to Julie Jensen's counseling records, did you?
I don't think I did.
Amazing
You didn't
how
know
that
that
happens.
several years earlier, she had been prescribed an antidepressant.
I may have known that. I'm not sure.
I think you testified today that one of the reasons you thought this was homicide and not suicide is that a suicide would typically take a large enough dose to kill themselves.
Yes.
And then you explained and held up Mr. Jamboy's NyQuil cup that 30 milliliters is enough to kill somebody.
Yes.
Wow. Amazing.
Take into consideration,
Yes.
with your opinion, information that that there had been a suicide attempt in Julie Jensen's family.
Yes.
I've been hearing that
Did you ever
all
speak
through
directly with
this.
Dr. Gorman about his assessment of
Amazing.
depression?
No.
I want to talk a little bit about asphyxiation and the findings in the autopsy. If you saw injuries to the lips or cheeks, would that be an indication of asphyxiation?
It could be. Yes.
In this case, there were no injuries to the lips or cheeks.
That's correct.
There were no teeth marks anywhere.
No.
The neck showed no sign of injury.
That's correct. Unless you count the perimortem
What?
yellow mark.
There was no damage to the larynx we talked about,
Correct.
and you'd see that if there was pressure on the neck.
You could.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You talked about positional asphyxia a little bit on direct exam today, right?
Yes.
And the notes that I scribbled down when you testified is that you said it was not positional asphyxia because that wouldn't explain the injury on the ribs.
Yes.
That's the injury that when we talked about, you agreed could have just been congestion.
Yes.
Could have been just postmortem lividity, that pooling of blood.
Yes.
She's looking at the prosecution
aside
like,
from
save me.
That explanation, you don't
Save
have an
me.
explanation for the injury to the ribs.
Aside from those two explanations, no.
It's a common finding, and it
Well, you can
much
make
easier
up
to tell, right?
explanations. God.
The only reason you think asphyxiation occurred in this case is because of Aaron Dillard,
Not necessarily. I would say he is my main reason.
because he provided
That's a
an
bad
explanation
reason.
for that notation about her ribs,
And a lot of other information,
found at autopsy, right?
including that.
Prior to hearing about Aaron Dillard, your opinion was that Julie Jensen had died of ethylene glycol poisoning.
Correct.
And your opinion was that it was probably a homicide.
Yes.
And that was based on her unabsorbed ethylene glycol in her gastric contents.
That was one factor.
And the other was that that she was experiencing multiple phases at once, right?
Objection. The question assumes the existence of a fact which is not in evidence. In fact, is contrary to the prior answer. So I object to that question.
Well, why don't you ask her what her opinion was based on?
Oh,
I'll rephrase it.
well, prosecution brought that shit up in the first place. He knows he's got her.
One of the reasons you thought it was homicide is because she had unabsorbed ethylene glycol in her gastric contents.
Yes.
What's the other reason?
Objection. Again, he assumes the existence of a fact not in evidence. To wit, that there's only two reasons.
What are the other reasons?
Thank you.
The As I tried to explain in the beginning, the case did not look like a case of suicide. It did not look like a suicidal ingestion. The circumstances simply were wrong.
Is one of the other reasons that she had crystals in her kidney at the same time she had unmetabolized ethylene glycol in her blood?
No,
That didn't play a part in your opinion?
no,
That didn't play a part in your opinion that there were more than one dose?
no.
Is the opinion that there was more than one dose because there was the amount in her gastric contents?
That my opinion is partially based on that.
You testified about the letter Aaron Dillard wrote.
Yes.
Did you also review the recorded statement that Aaron Dillard gave
I believe I saw at least part of it.
at some point in your history with this case?
Yes.
In the letter that you reviewed, he describes kind of the evening of December 1st, December 2nd, and then December 3rd, correct?
Yes.
And on December 2nd, described that Julie Jensen was vomiting a little.
That sounds familiar. Yes.
Did you review in his recorded statement that she wouldn't get out of bed, was really just vomiting?
I recall that. Yes.
You've looked at the scene photos in this case.
Yes.
Have you seen any indication that there was vomit on the bed sheets?
No.
Any indication that there was vomit in the garbage can next to the bed?
No.
Any indication that any vomit was found anywhere?
No.
I think you were asked on direct.
Yes,
about
she
Aaron
was.
Dillard. I think Mr. Jamboy's asked you. You know he's an admitted con man, right, or something like that?
Yes.
And your answer is yes, right?
Yes.
That you know that about him.
Yes, I do.
You understand that a really good con artist can figure out ways to present a story that aren't obvious to other people.
Yes.
Precisely. Unless she's got an empty stomach.
Mr. Dillard indicated that Mark Jensen told him that he pushed on her back or lungs or something like that, right?
Yes.
Someone might create that story if they realize there was damage in the lung or rib area.
Possibly.
Aaron Dillard's letter describes what medications Julie Jensen was taking.
Yes.
It's not a confession if Mark Jensen had told Aaron Dillard what medications Julie was taking.
No. No. If he's in isolation, no. If that's what you mean.
Aaron Dillard's statement and the findings at autopsy line up in your opinion, correct?
Yes.
Of course.
Today you testified that there was no other source for that info,
For which info?
for Aaron Dillard to have that information, but for Mark Jensen.
I am not aware. I am aware of materials that Aaron Dillard had access to.
Which ones are those?
I believe that he had access to an interview with Detective Ratsburg between Mark Jensen and Detective Ratsburg.
Uh-huh.
It was also well known that this was an antifreeze poisoning case.
Yes.
There were newspapers articles about this.
Yes.
There have been articles about your testimony.
Yes, they have.
There have been articles about your testimony that it was your opinion that multiple doses were given.
Yes.
Anyone who read that article would know the state's theory that multiple doses were given.
Possibly.
You mentioned Detective Ratsburg's interview with Mark Jensen. Did you read that?
I'm not sure that I read the same interview that was in the cell with Mark Jensen.
You're aware of the description of the interview, the interrogation between Detective Ratsburg and Mark Jensen.
Yes.
And you know that he was suggesting deaths that he thought were consistent with the autopsy findings.
Yes.
He even suggested an autoerotic death.
I don't
Uh-huh.
recall that.
Yeah, he did. Of course, she
It
wouldn't
doesn't matter
recall that.
because nobody's suggesting that happened, right?
Not to my knowledge.
He suggested in that interrogation the location of her arm.
5 to 20 hours.
I don't remember.
His suggestions incorporated what Dr. Chambliss described as a neck hemorrhage, the petechia over the cardio area, and the bruising on the ribs.
I honestly don't remember if he referred to all of those things.
You just don't remember precisely what he referred to.
Correct.
But it's your understanding that Aaron Dillard had access to that.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about this claim of poisoning in November, right?
Yes.
That's one of Aaron Dillard's claims,
Yes.
that Mark Jensen had tried to poison Julie Jensen in November when he was at a conference
Yes.
and got home and found that there was vomit everywhere that hadn't been cleaned up.
Yes.
In terms of your, I guess, investigation or overview of this case, are you aware of any reports of her being sick for a several-day period in November of 1998?
It depends on how you describe sick.
From what I
By
can tell,
vomiting
it would
or
be
by-
hard to do
Sure,
that.
vomiting.
No.
Any reports from neighbors that Julie Jensen was sick prior to December of 1998?
I don't think so.
Anything from the Voights?
No, I don't think so.
People at school?
I don't think so.
Any reports that she didn't tend to her usual activities in November?
No,
That she needed help with the kids?
I don't recall. I don't think so.
She was at home with the kids in November, right?
Yes.
Any claim anywhere that she appeared intoxicated in November?
No.
You reviewed Dr. Borman's notes. Did you see anything that she came in for treatment in November?
No.
No description about any breathing abnormalities in November?
No.
If Julie Jensen had been endlessly vomiting on December 2nd and then not eating, would you expect to see 22 ounces of material in her stomach?
And what day did you say?
December 2nd.
She may have been drinking.
Yeah, that
You've been asked
stumped him.
this before, and I'm just going to ask you once again. Would you buy a used car from Aaron Dillard?
No.
I have nothing else.
Redirect, Mr. Chambliss.
Thank you. Dr. Malin, you were asked on cross-examination about injuries to the neck.
Yes.
And the kind of injuries they were asking about are the kind of injuries you expect to see with a strangulation, right?
They're asking about injuries that I said weren't there. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes.
And you never suggested that there'd been a strangulation in this case, had you?
No.
Now, when you were asked about the injuries to the rib cage, after being asked a series of questions about it, you indicated, I don't think it was post-mortem. Is that true?
I think that's what I said.
Because they're making it up as they
So
go
what do you think it
along.
was when you observed these injuries after reading Aaron Dillard's report?
I thought it was perimortem.
Like
And you think it's
hardcore.
consistent with perimortem injuries.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go through the ante-peri post. Antemortem, A-N-T-E, mortem is pre-death.
Yes.
Perimortem, P-E-R-I, mortem is during the death process.
Right.
And post-mortem is after death.
Yes.
So post-mortem artifacts are something you expect to see that could come up after somebody, it's a post-mortem artifact, something that happens after death.
Yes.
And antemortem is something that could happen before death.
Yes.
But perimortem is something that happens during the death process.
Around the time of death.
Now, the injuries that you saw on Julie Jensen's ribcage in the photos was consistent with a perimortem injury, an injury during death that would be caused by somebody sitting on a ribcage while her arm is stretched beneath her, as it was in the two photos that we displayed earlier to the jury.
I object to the leading.
It is. That is complete bullshit right there.
Is it consistent or inconsistent with that?
Rephrase it and let's go.
Is it consistent or inconsistent? Is the notion of perimortem injury consistent or inconsistent with the two photographs that we displayed to the jury earlier that you were testifying about?
Consistent.
It could.
Now, counsel was also asking you questions about another statement. This was the recorded statement, recorded interview that Mark Jensen, or that Aaron Dillard had, that involved his defense attorney, the prosecutor, that being myself, and Aaron Dillard. Did you read that transcript?
Between or among the three of you?
It was a transcript of an interview that I conducted with Aaron Dillard that was recorded with his attorney present, Gretchen Rosenke. Do you recall ever seeing that transcript?
No, I don't.
Oh, come on. This prosecutor is horrible. God.
I'm going to direct the court and counsel's and the defendants and the witnesses' attention to the screen.
And what exhibit is this for the record?
Well, this is our screen version of Exhibit 71, Your Honor.
Right.
And we don't know where Exhibit 71 is. If we can't locate it anywhere, I will confess that ordinarily I'm the prime suspect when something is missing like this. And if we can locate it, I'll produce it. If I can't locate it, I'll produce another one and we'll have it remarked.
We'll fix it.
So in any event, now that you've seen the first page of this, does that look familiar to you at all?
Yes, it does.
So you did at one point see this interview that was, it says J. Jamboys, D. Dillard, G. Gabrielle, and R. Gretchen Rosenke.
Yes.
And you know who Angelina Gabrielle is.
Yes.
And you know who I am. And so let's
skip over all of that, please. Please.
Aaron Dillard is asked about where this conversation occurred. He said he was in J Block in the Kenosha County Jail. Is that correct?
Yes.
He starts talking about how they got together and we're talking about this, correct?
Yes.
And then I asked, I want to hear exactly what he said. And he replied, okay, he said it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. This club guy just came and said this, and they revoked my bond because that's basically what the conversation was about. Why are you in jail? You were in bond, you know? And he said this guy wrote a letter saying, I want to kill my wife, or this and that. And he just comes out now. And so then we started getting more deeper into the conversations, meaning, well, why would he say that? You know, things along that line. And he would have just answered that he was an attention getter. He was just seeing this as his big moment. He could try to steal the limelight or whatever, something like that. I don't remember the exact words, but that's the gist of how we started talking about his case. And then right away when I first got there, that's when, we just started talking, and he asked me about myself, and I said, well, yeah, I'm here for revocation and all that. And it was just a minor chit chat about my case and things like that. And I said, well, yeah, I'm looking at 4.5 years or whatever unextended, but I said, I don't think I'll get it. I'll probably get a chunk of it, but not that much. And we went through the conversation more, and then he said, well, yeah. And he said, here, he gave me this transcript, the actual transcripts from the Klug hearing, and I read that transcript. And then I asked, it was a transcript of what? Of the Klug hearing. Of what? Of Klug's testimony? Dillard, his testimony, yeah, Klug's testimony. Now, that you've read that, does that refresh your recollection as to what documents it was that Aaron Dillard had reviewed in the county jail?
Yes.
He hadn't reviewed Mark Jensen's interview with Paul Rathberg. He'd reviewed Ed Klug's transcript of his testimony from the forfeiture, from the first hearing.
Yes.
So he never read anything in the paper.
And he said, his testimony, yeah, Klug's testimony. And I told him at that point, I said, this is kind of really lame. What I meant, if you look at it, it seems just kind of out there that there's nothing concrete in this. And I said, the only thing that's going to get you this is when we started talking about. He was like, well, how do you think I can get around this thing? And I told him, I don't think you can. If the two secretaries say that you did come back, or that Klug did come back and say these things to them, because in the transcript he said something about he came back to the office and he mentioned it to two of his secretaries or whatever. I think it was somewhere at the end of his statement. And I said, well, if he comes back and they say that he did say those things, that you're fucked. That they can collaborate his statement, then you're screwed. I don't think there's a way around it. Jay, so question. So what did he say to that? Dillard. He was kind of quiet, think about it. And he spoke about, he had some spots outlined in it in his paperwork, and said that in that statement and that testimony, that shows on he was just an attention getter and seeker, and that he was talking about specific people in there. And he probably wouldn't say anything. And that he had probably already, when we were going through the testimony at the court hearing, that he probably already sent an investigator down to try to talk to them. He told me that.
Judge, I object to Mr. Jampo's reading this entire transcript.
Yeah, you should.
He asked about
How many pages is the transcript?
well, here, let me,
Tell me how many pages the transcript is.
first of all, Judge, I was going to read the entire transcript, but it is 34. It's
I
35.
read the entire transcript in the last 5 minutes.
Well, not yet.
What's that?
I said not yet.
You said you objected to him reading the entire transcript.
Sure.
I do listen.
He's in the middle of it.
Let's finish it up in the area, Mr. Jambos.
I'm getting there, Judge. Thank you. Mr. Dillard might not be quite as succinct as I might be on my own devices. But, I'll skip down some in deference to, the jury's time and
Yeah, please
then we
do.
started talking a little bit more. I was just talking with my lawyer that there are some things that you can look at and verify that we talked. And he asked me also, this was later on, he asked me, well, what do you think I can do to get around it? And this was at the point when he was telling me about the toxicology report, about how you guys lost, or the department lost a big stack of papers or whatever it was along that they lost it. Now let's stop there for a moment, Dr. Mainland. Have you been made aware of the fact that the St. Louis Forensic Toxicology Lab had lost some of the paperwork in this case?
I think so.
Yeah. And so how would Aaron Dillard know that if Mark Jensen hadn't told him?
I don't know.
So the stuff that was lost in the St. Louis Forensic Toxicology Lab, they didn't lose the samples or anything like that, did they?
I don't think so.
They just lost some of the paperwork, and they asked to get it replaced, didn't they?
Yes.
And you guys replaced the paperwork that they lost.
Yes.
But how would Aaron Dillard know that if Mark Jensen hadn't told him that?
I don't know.
It certainly wasn't Ed Klug's transcript, was it?
No.
But you were aware that the transcript of Ed Klug's testimony from the first hearing related to his conversation with Mark Jensen in St. Louis, correct?
Yes.
It didn't
Prosecutor.
relate, to your knowledge,
You're
we'll state whether it relates to anything other
wasting
than
your
the
time.
conversation that occurred in St. Louis between Mark Jensen and Ed Klug.
Object to the leading.
Rephrase, just
It
rephrase.
is.
You know whether Ed Klug's testimony at the first hearing related to anything other than the conversation that Ed Klug allegedly had with Mark Jensen at St. Louis.
Colonel's a
No.
freaking moron.
So then Aaron Dillard continued, and I told him that that you have
They're
the right to examine the evidence.
gonna
try to get samples of it yourself and then test it yourself.
tear this
And
up and
if they provide you with
cross.
that sample, and or if they can't provide you that sample, and then he got on the phone right away and called his people, so you can probably verify on the phone records between the 14th and the 17th. I forgot exactly which day it was, but you can
Yeah,
probably
we
verify
went
his phone
over
records
this
because you can
crap
hear him
the
say
other
it, and he
day.
told me that I should just try to get the samples rechecked. So I'm like, don't say me. you on the background, you might
Prosecution
be
is
able to
just
say it.
wasting
Examiner replies, well,
as
step one
much
thing, that's
time
phone
as he
conversations with
can.
attorneys, and we do not record those conversations.
What does this have to do with her?
I don't know if it was his attorney or his wife at the time.
Toxicology.
Oh. So
The
the time he was
forensic
talking to us, he was
pathologist
proposing that we check the phone records to confirm
has
the
nothing to
veracity
do
of this
with it.
information to us.
Yes.
Yes,
To your knowledge, the defense ever have these
they
toxicology
cross-examined
samples
him yesterday.
Yes.
So they hadn't lost the samples at St. Louis Forensic Toxicology Lab, did
No.
they? They did have them.
Yeah. So yesterday they had two people in that were both former prisoners. Yeah, both of them testified. One of them, Mr. Dillard, that he brought up. Mr. Dillard happened to be, for his testimony, he basically got a nice letter written by this prosecutor, because this is the original prosecutor. He got a letter written for basically getting him less time, basically off on probation. And of course, he's back in the prison system again because, well, he's a career criminal. He steals from people, lies, cheats, runs scams all the time. So he's in quite a bit of trouble still. The other one that they brought in was up for about 68 years of prison time, which is actually his story is pretty good. He got out of prison after committing a bank robbery, and whenever he got out of prison, he actually turned his life around, and now is like helping people stay off the streets, which is good to see. Seemed to be a pretty straight up guy. The other one, not so much. He's a total ass. And then whenever they brought him in, he was just not even credible as a witness. I don't know why the prosecution used him except to waste time and try to get this information that they're running over again. They're trying to keep this in the jury's mind, saying that home chicken over here did all this talking and basically confessed to it in prison.
Tested, just as Mr. Dillard had recommended that they do.
Yes.
So Jamboy's question, okay, a guy in here said I should check get the samples rechecked. Dillard, yeah, something along that line. That I told him, because if they lost them, you should be able to test the evidence yourself. Jamboy's, that's what you told him, Dillard, and that's what I told Mark, and I said if they don't have them, then that's a big problem. And then he says, or Jamboy's, and was this the first day that you first met him, or was this Dillard? This was.
Folks, if you ever go to jail for doing something really stupid, realize that every single person in jail is just as stupid as you. That's what ended them up there. So if they're giving you advice in jail, I don't know. I wouldn't trust it.
It was more toward the second day, because I got on the first day, I got in there around about 7, and they locked down at 9. And what day was you got there? I got there on the 14th, I believe it was. Jamboy, so this was sometime on the 15th that he made this phone call. Dillard, yeah, the 15th or the 16th. I think it was more toward the 15th, though, in the evening time, probably around 6-ish.
This has nothing to do with it.
Okay, so then what happened after the conversation? Was there anything more that occurred during the conversation? Dillard, the one about testing the samples and things like that? Jamboys, yes. Dillard, it was basically just how to beat the case and what they did, what did they have against you, and what is your defense against it? And he was just going into detail about the pictures with the antifreeze, and that you guys came to him saying there was no antifreeze in the house, Mark. How could she have gotten the antifreeze? And he's telling me that in the pictures there are 2 bottles right in the thing, so he had that as a defense. He told me about the receipts.
Defense is sitting there shaking their head. You know that they're shaking their head, because whenever they try to get this shit stopped, the judge lets it go, lets it continue on. He's done this multiple times, and every time that he goes off on one of his little reads, I'm really getting aggravated with this prosecutor. I'm surprised the judge hasn't shut it down.
That his wife would be the only one that was buying all the prescriptions and all the St. John's wort and all over the counter medication, and that he would never do it. He was trying to use that as a defense. And then Angelina Gabrielle asked, "Did he?" Jamboys, she
don't care.
Acid reflux. No,
how many pages are you going to go through? Okay, we've got down to 2 pages that he's read out of a 35 page document.
He seemed to think that was a big issue and going to use that as a defense. She killed herself. Was that the expression that he used? I'm ready to go. Did he say that expression? Dillard, yeah. Bring it on. Yeah, bring it on were key words. Yeah, they can bring it on. And how did you respond to that when you would say things like that?
Why don't we get to some redirect questions, Mr. Dillard?
Yeah. Thank you. For God's sakes. About damn time, Judge. That was just like 30 minutes or at least 20 minutes of him just testifying without being able to stop it.
Yeah, the second day I was in there, we got more into the conversation of, well, why would those people say, or why would these people say you did it? And he goes, I don't know. It's just they're trying to grab the limelight, more along those lines. Then I was like, well,
testifying.
Something along that line.
Objection.
Tell me about that conversation, Dillard. That was
objection.
Now that you're seeing this, does that refresh your recollection as to the conversation that occurred between myself and Aaron Dillard? That was
Yes.
recorded? Dillard, that conversation started out as, I know, it was basically you didn't have to kill her, doctor that day.
I think you've refreshed your memory enough, Mr. Jamboys.
Yeah.
Well, I'm getting to the part that I really wanted to get to.
Well, let's get.
So he started on page 9. Started on page 9. Here he is on page 15. How do I know? That's what that means right there.
get to the part, and then we'll ask a question on redirect.
Yeah, how about
Patients,
that?
It was, the St. John's Wort.
Yeah, look.
The part that I really wanted to get to.
Well, let's get to the part, and then
Wa-
we'll ask a
watch-
question on redirect.
Watch their face.
So
Watch defense's face.
he told you,
They're just like, what in the hell?
Erin Dillard said she took the Paxil, she took more medications. It was, the St.
I mean, good Lord.
John's Wort. Kept saying the St. John's Wort. Tonight, when you hear this, will make you sleepy.
Had said what?
You had heard Mark Jensen.
You put her to sleep.
Is that consistent with the history that you knew about this case?
Yes.
You had heard Mark Jensen had said this in his earlier statement to Detective Ratsberg, correct?
Had said what?
That Mark Jensen had told Paul Ratsberg that she, on that first night, she was really loopy and tired. The first night after she'd gone to see the doctor.
Yes.
Yes, she totally face palmed.
And at that point, then he goes on, and so he would give her stuff to drink. And he said, that's when he put the antifreeze in there. And I said, wow, how much did you give her? You know what? I mean, didn't she notice that? And he said that at that point, he said that he would mix it probably like a third to 2/3 of juice so that you wouldn't be able to see it and you wouldn't be able to taste it. Question. So 1/3 antifreeze, 2/3 juice? Yeah. And so he gave her the antifreeze that day. And then at nighttime, he said she was acting like a nutcase. She was up in the bed dancing around saying, oh, I'm so drunk. I feel so drunk. Now that's consistent with the history that Mark Jensen had provided to Paul Ratsberg, correct?
Yes.
But there's nothing like that in Ed Klug's statements, is there? Or Ed Klug's, the transcript of Ed Klug's testimony from the first hearing.
No, because you're the assholes that brought this shit up. See? Right there. Right there. And he brought it up earlier in that. He's the one that keeps bringing it up. He's basically feeding the information to the guy. God.
Oh.
Yes.
And then he told me about how he went to the internet to show her that Paxil was a side effect of drunkenness. He said, oh, look, it's just the Paxil. Don't worry about it. Blah, 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 blah. So now you were aware of the fact that there was evidence that Mark Jensen actually printed out some internet information about Paxil or paroxetine.
Yes.
Paroxetine is the generic name for Paxil, correct?
Yes.
To show his
And
wife.
listed as one of the rare side effects, possible rare side effects of paroxetine or Paxil. There is some reference to maybe vertigo or getting dizzy and things of that sort.
Yes.
But that's a rare side effect, correct?
Yes.
It's not a common side effect.
No.
But it's still a fucking side effect. Ah.
So then he said everything calmed down after he showed her the paroxetine side effect information, and she ended up going to bed. And the next day he went to the doctor and told him, she's acting drunk. She's all crazy, wouldn't sleep at all that night. And he got her sleeping medication, which was the Ambien. He got her the Ambien. Now that's consistent with the information that was obtained at or during the toxicology screens in this case. Is that true?
Yes.
And it was also consistent with the evidence that was recovered at the scene. Do you remember that?
Yes.
There were
Yes.
a certain number of Ambien pills, and there were some that were missing.
Yes.
And he said he came home after the doctor and gave her the Ambien, and she was sleeping. And then he woke her up and gave her more of the antifreeze, another glass of it. And at that point, he said the whole day she was throwing up and she was just really out of it. If you know what I mean, she was sick and this and that. And at that point, he said she would just stay in bed a lot, that she wouldn't get out of bed, and that she was really just vomiting and she'd stay in bed. That's actually consistent with the testimony you just provided on cross-examination about this information.
Yes.
Correct? And then he says, and he was like, wow, he didn't know if this was working or not because she was still fine, basically about it, He's like, wow, expected it to be faster or something. And what I take out of the conversation, because he was more in, I don't know what the word too is, he was more concerned with time,
Yes.
it seemed like, that it wasn't happening as fast as he thought it was or something like that. That's what I got from the conversation. And then he sat with TV and watched TV with the kids. Now you've heard other evidence in this case that's consistent with the history that Mark Jensen provided to Paul Ratsberg, isn't it? That he
Yes.
was sitting up with the kids watching TV on the evening of December 2nd.
Yes.
And that's consistent with what the information is contained here.
Yes.
But Ed Klug had never said anything about that in the testimony at the first hearing, did he?
No.
He sat with TV and watched TV with the kids and something like that, and she would just ask for a lot of water. She was drinking a lot of water and throwing up.
Yeah.
So
That's what you do when you're sick.
That night, he gave her more of the Ambien. Then he said the next day when she woke up, she was really bad. Now, first of all, that's consistent with the second and third stage of ethylene glycol poisoning, isn't it? That she woke up and she was really bad.
Yes.
And you'd heard that that's consistent also with how.
Okay.
his son had described her-
He's
her
gone
week
another
last weekend to one
page.
of his little school friends.
Yes.
Then he said the next day when she woke up, she was really bad. It was.
Okay. We got it. Oh,
He
Jesus.
said like he didn't know what to do at that point because again, he said
Another page.
I could. However, in Ed Klug's testimony at the first hearing,
We
the
understand.
murder of Julie Jensen.
There were the toxicology findings.
Were those items that you found that you found from the autopsy report, the autopsy photographs, and the crime scene photographs that precisely corresponded to this description of the murder of Julie Jensen?
There were the toxicology findings, the position of the body at the time it was discovered, certain injuries on the body, and I think I said the autopsy findings.
No, There was significant discussion on cross-examination about gastrophoresis and a lot of other big, as you call them, doctor words. You know all those doctor words when you were reviewing the autopsy report,
Right.
and when you were reviewing the photographs and the crime scene photographs, the autopsy photographs.
Right.
When you were reviewing all the police reports in this case and the witness statements.
Yeah.
And knowing all of that information, what you knew prior to your testimony at the first hearing, or and even at the first hearing, what was your opinion? Did you have an opinion to a reasonably medical certainty as the cause and manner of death of Julie Jensen?
Yes.
And what was that opinion?
Ethylene glycol poisoning, homicide.
And so the cause of death was ethylene glycol poisoning, and the manner of death was homicide.
According to her, but that's not how it was ruled to start out with.
Yes.
And at that point, had you ruled out possible asphyxiation?
No.
No. That's what you knew up to the first hearing. Then between the first hearing and the second hearing, you'd read of Aaron Dillard's report.
Yes.
You'd read the statement that I just read to you.
Yes.
And you read Aaron Dillard's letter to Gretchen Rosenke.
Yes.
And there was a high level of consistency between the letter and this statement.
Yes.
The letter was only 6 pages long. The statement was about 35 pages long. The interview was 35 pages long, correct?
Yes.
But there was no significant inconsistencies between them.
I don't think so.
And there was a great deal of consistency, or was it? Could tell me whether or not was there a great deal of consistency between the description that was provided by Aaron Dillard and the physical evidence that you reviewed from the crime scene photos and the autopsy photos?
It was consistent.
And was it consistent or inconsistent with the toxicology results?
Consistent.
And with respect to missing toxicology reports or losing toxicology reports by the St. Louis Forensic Toxicology Lab, was this information consistent or inconsistent with what you knew of the history about the St. Louis Forensic Toxicology reports?
Consistent.
And there was nothing in in Ed Klug's prior testimony at the first hearing that made any
All right, you
reference
little
whatsoever
red-faced
to certain missing
troll.
documents
That's
from the
correct.
St. Louis Forensic Toxicology Lab. And based upon whether it's based upon after Aaron Dillard had proposed to the defense team that they should request that all of those substances be retested, you learned that in fact all of those substances were retested, weren't they?
Yes.
At the defense request,
Yes.
consistent with Aaron Dillard's recommendation.
Yes.
And none of this retesting was none of this information about these missing reports from the St. Louis Forensic Toxicology Lab was available from any source other than Mark Jensen at that point to Aaron Dillard. Is that true?
Yes.
No.
No. After reading Aaron Dillard's statements, you then testified at the second hearing.
Yes.
Correct? And you've now testified at the third hearing.
Yes.
And knowing all of this stuff, you knew all of this stuff about gastrophoresis and delayed stomach emptying and the kidneys shutting down. You knew all of that before.
Big boy with the camera looked like he was doing
Yes.
something
So all of
else.
these things were raised on cross-examination. You knew all about that long before you testified today
Yes.
and long before you testified at the last hearing.
Yes.
Does any of the stuff that was raised by defense counsel on cross-examination in any way, shape, or form alter your opinion concerning the cause and manner of death of Julie Jensen?
No.
So
Calm down, you little red-faced beat. Seriously, calm down. He's getting all worked up, and he's going to get his ass handed to him on redirect. It will happen.
based upon your observations of the crime scene photos, your examination of the autopsy report, your examination
You're fatiguing, buddy. You're fatiguing.
of the toxicology report, your examination of all the police reports and the witness statements and the transcripts from the first hearing, and the statement of Aaron Dillard, what is your opinion today to reasonably medical certainty as to the cause and manner of death of Julie Jensen?
Ethylene glycol poisoning with
That's her opinion. That was not the original.
probable terminal asphyxia, homicide.
Nothing further. Recross.
There he goes. Yes.
Librium is a benzodiazepine, right?
Yes.
That's used to treat anxiety.
Yes.
You just testified that it's your opinion that the injuries that were noted on Julie Jensen's ribcage were paramortem.
Yes.
That became your opinion only after reviewing Aaron Dillard's statement.
Yes.
Because before that, as consistent with your testimony earlier today, it was non-specific, right?
Objection to the insertion of that editorial comment in the middle.
You can tell that he is just so over this little red man.
Of his question. He can ask a question. He can't tell the witness what the answer. First of all, what she said earlier is something that the jury may remember, but defense counsel can assert that fact in the middle of his question.
She just agreed to that
Yes, she did.
fact by saying yes.
No, I think I said yes.
You answered, yeah, you said that it was non-specific, right?
Yes.
Could have been postmortem.
Could have.
Could just be congestion.
Could be.
Only after reading Aaron Dillard's statement did you decide it was paramortem.
Correct.
You
Yeah.
remember testifying in 2007?
Yes. Vaguely.
The first hearing we've been talking about?
Yes.
There was a big issue in terms of a mistake that had been made with the findings by the St. Louis lab, correct?
Objection. Objection. This is outside the scope of cross.
No, it's
I
not.
didn't hear him asking about something.
This
being
is all-
wrong.
this
is
I can't listen to two people at once.
This is all in relation to this issue about lost papers from the
You
St.
could
Louis
ask
lab.
that question in that area. Go ahead.
That's what I'm getting at.
You didn't use that exact word, so let's go.
Well, I had to set the context, but I'll get to it. By the time of that hearing in 2007, things had been retested.
Yes,
What was lost were police reports that had been sent to the St. Louis lab, correct?
I'm not sure of the exact content,
Samples were never lost, to your knowledge.
to my knowledge.
That's correct?
Yeah, I don't think they were. I don't recall.
Did you review all the discovery in this case?
I reviewed what was provided to me.
In terms of a potential source of information for Aaron Dillard, all of that was testified to in 2007, correct?
All of,
In terms of the St. Louis lab and police reports that had been lost.
I don't recall.
You testified a number of times on redirect that the information provided by Aaron Dillard was not contained in the Ed Klug transcript, correct?
Yes,
And then on a handful of times you said that it was consistent with what was said in the interrogation by Detective Ratsberg.
yes.
You've read that interrogation, correct?
Yeah, at least part of it.
Yeah, he's gonna nail this out right here.
I think what I had was not this thick.
For the record, what did you show her?
This is the transcript of the interrogation between Detective Ratsberg and Mark Jensen.
Thank you.
I just want to say that I'm not sure I had the entire thing.
Oh, imagine that.
Yes. I may have had the entire thing.
You tried, one of the things that you tried to do in this case is review all information that was in existence, correct?
All information that was provided to me.
And this is an interrogation of who the state believes is a suspect in this case.
That's correct.
This would have been important for you in your roles of forensic pathologist, correct?
Yes,
In terms of statements made by Mark Jensen.
yes.
Grim. Ooh, 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 ooh. Yes, I understand what you're saying. Spider senses. Yes. Mine has been going off since day one on this. Something does not smell right about this whole thing. And I think that's why it got kicked back for a retrial. Because something just wasn't adding up. I don't know what it is. It's a big possibility this guy killed his wife. I think he's guilty personally, but the prosecution is not making a good case, and they've done some really shady stuff all along the way, from getting people turncoat in prison, things that were said that were never corroborated. They actually had people showing up. I mean, let's put it this way. Wife in 1992 goes while her husband is out of town, gets one of her coworkers to come over and service her. Yeah, that happened. And then, of course, later on, they have kids, and all of a sudden, he just up and offs her. Of course, he was cheating on her. Like I said, there's just so many bad inconsistencies in all of this. And I don't know what it is, but something's just not right.
You were just asked a lot of questions about information that Aaron Dillard provided that was not contained in the Ed Klug transcript.
Correct.
And that's information describing the autopsy findings, correct?
Yes.
The Ed Klug transcript doesn't talk about the autopsy findings.
I don't think so.
If you turn to page 75 to 76,
Counsel, what are you looking at right now? Ed Klug's transcript?
the interrogation with Detective Ratsberg.
He's
Page 76,
getting to
75
it.
to 76, starting at line 24 to line 3 on 76. It's Detective Ratsberg. Tell me when you're there, I'm sorry.
I'm there.
It's Detective Ratsberg that says her arm was actually here. I'll show you how she was. Okay, her arm is actually across her body like that. Okay, and it's an unnatural position. Do you sleep when you're on your side with your arm across like that? Do you see that?
Yes, I do recall reading this.
I could direct your attention to page 98 to 99, lines 25 on 98 to 16 on 99.
Okay, Counsel, I'm sorry. I need to, what page are you looking at?
98, line 25 to page 99, line 16. Please let me know when you're there.
See, that's
Okay.
how
It's
you
Detective
do it.
Ratsburg that says, I know there was some type of contact there. There had to be in this chest area, Mark. There's no question about that. And the only person that could have done that was you. I'm thinking before you left, you pushed on her maybe. Now she was frail at the time. She was frail. You said she was labored breathing. That makes sense, and I believe that. Okay, I know that probably happened, but she's frail. And you just innocently, I don't want to, pushed her like that. And could that have caused something? I mean, we have petechia of the lungs. There's some type of contact here in the throat. There's also been an indication on the throat, as I showed you in Dr. Chambliss's report. It just did not appear there. Something and somebody had to touch her. That's the only way it could get there. There's no doubt about that. And did you push her, touch her on the throat maybe? Maybe like this? Do you see that?
Yes.
No, that's not in anywhere in the Ed Klug transcript, right?
I don't think so.
But it is consistent with Dr. Chambliss's findings in the autopsy report.
Yes.
And it's consistent with the statement that Aaron Dillard made.
Yes.
If you could go to page 152, lines 3 to 6.
Come on, defense, bring it home.
152,
152, line 6,
lines 3 to 6.
3 to 6.
Sorry.
No, I'm just waiting for you. Yeah. It's Detective Ratsburg that says, maybe when you pulled her over this way, you pushed her back on the chest and then went back and brought her up again. You know, you would have pushed her back. You see that?
Yes.
If you could go to page 161, lines 19 through 20.
Page 161.
Yes.
Prosecution is so pissed right now. Wait, 161. You know, prosecution has his wife sitting behind him.
Yes.
It's Detective Ratsburg that says, we still have to explain the nose part, the head pushed into the pillow. How are we going to explain that? I mean, that's there. You see that?
Yes.
That's not in Ed Klug's transcript, right?
Right.
But it does line up with what Aaron Dillard says.
Yes.
If you go to page 162.
Amazing,
lines 4 through
huh?
9.
Amazing.
Okay, I'm there.
It's Detective Ratsburg that says something had to push it down. There's 3 things that happened here. Head being pushed, the nose, some type of contact here at the throat, and some type of contact here in the chest. Okay? We know that happened. Okay? You were the only one there. You had to do something, Mark. You see that?
Yes.
That's not in the Klug transcript,
No.
but it is consistent with what Aaron Dillard says.
Yes.
Weird, huh?
I had asked you on cross-exam about potential sources of information for Aaron Dillard's statement, correct?
Yes.
I'd asked you that whether it was well known that this was an antifreeze poisoning case,
Yes.
that there were newspaper articles
Yes.
about you,
Yes.
and you volunteered that it was your understanding that Aaron Dillard also had access to the Detective Ratsburg interrogation.
Yes.
Aaron Dillard,
There it
as
is.
just read by Mr. Jamboys, denies reviewing anything except for the Klug transcript, correct?
I don't recall.
Just now.
Yeah, please, if you would find that.
Well, in the letter or in the recorded statement that was, maybe not all of it was read, but and Mr. Jamboys asked, does this refresh your recollection in terms of what Aaron Dillard says he got the information from? Do you remember that?
Yes.
And that Aaron Dillard's claim is that he got this from Ed Klug?
That part I don't remember.
Okay. You
She
reviewed
just said it.
everything that was provided to you in this case, correct?
Yes.
You reviewed way more than just Aaron Dillard's statement.
Yes.
And when I asked you about sources of information, is your understanding that the transcript that's in front of you that you were just reading from, that Aaron Dillard had access to it while at the jail?
Yes, he may have. He was in the same cell.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Do we have exhibits that are by the doctor?
Just one. Oh, 2.
Let's collect them. You're free to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're done.
Well, Your Honor, I did have a few questions for her. On
You did a
redirect.
redirect already.
Pardon me?
You did your redirect.
Yeah.
We're not going to do double redirects. We haven't done it for any witness. We're not going to start here.
There we go.
There you go.
Hell with you. Yeah. She wanted a chance to explain, and Judge wasn't having none of it. Good job, Judge. Yeah. Get your old butt up out of that seat. Go home.
Your Honor, we need to review the exhibits and make a decision about, make sure all the exhibits have been moved into evidence.
Let's go take our break right now while the attorneys do that.
Yeah. Take your break. Good job on defense. Good job on the defense.
All right, we are back on the record on Mark
Oh, boy.
Jensen, 2002 CF 314. The appearances are the same. Jury's back in the courtroom. I'll ask the state, Mr. Jamboys, what do you wish to do next?
The state would move exhibit 53, 60, 61, 70, 82, 83, 84, and 87 into evidence, Your Honor.
Do you have all that?
Oh, he is. You can tell he's still steamed. He just got
61 and 70.
nailed.
Oh, I'm sorry. 71 was already received. So 60, 61, 70, 82, 83, 84.
Okay.
to move in, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
So what does the state wish to do next?
At this point, Your Honor, the state rests.
All right, the state is resting, folks. They're
Holy crap. State took a break, came back, and they rested. That was, they went out hard. They lost hard on that.
direct portion has been completed. With that, the defense, do you wish to call a witness, Ms. Krause?
Yes, Judge, we call Jolene Bly.
All right.
And Judge, when we take a break, we will have a motion outside the presence of the jury.
Your motion's preserved. I know you called a witness, but I will preserve your motion and we can hear it.
Thank you.
Sort of feel bad for the brother having to
Okay, can you
relieve all
remain
that
silent, raise your
again.
right hand? Solemnly swear the
Does
testimony
all
is the
that
same.
again.
Have a seat. Get as close as you can to the microphone. Spell your first and last name, okay?
My first name is Jolynn, Jolynn. Last name is Bly, Blei.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Krause.
Jolene.
Ms. Bly, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what you
Jolene.
were doing in 2007 as it relates to recruitment.
Jolene.
Okay? Can you tell us where you were working?
I was
Jolene.
working at the law firm of Glenn Fitzgerald and Albee.
And how long had you been working for Glenn Fitzgerald and Albee?
Just about 4-ish years, 4.5.
In 2007?
Yeah, I started in 2003.
And do you still work for that firm?
I do not.
When did your employment change?
It changed a couple of times. It changed in 2011 when the firm
Disbanded?
yeah, and I was with Fitzgerald Law Firm until 2018, and then 2018 I started with Federal Defender Services of Wisconsin.
In 2007, what were your job duties?
I was a legal assistant.
And in 2007, did you know Mark Jensen?
I did.
And do you see him in court today?
I do.
And can you just identify what he's wearing?
He's wearing a dark colored suit, dark colored tie.
All right, the witness has identified Mr. Jensen in open court. Continue.
How did you know Mr. Jensen at that time?
He was a client in her office.
And did you work with his attorney and Mr. Jensen while he was a client?
I did.
And do you know the attorney that was representing him at that time?
I do.
And who was that?
Craig Albee.
And you worked with Mr. Albee?
I did.
What type of information or what were your job duties as it related to the Mark Jensen case?
Reviewing discovery, going through the case, organizing the case, working with Craig, doing any respect or any duties that he needed done, drafting correspondence, mailing things.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the mailing thing and drafting correspondence, okay? I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 94. Do you recognize that document?
I do.
And what is it?
It's a letter that I would have typed to Mark Jensen.
How do you know you would have typed it?
My initials are at the bottom, CWA-JMB.
And that just means that you're the one that typed it for Craig Albee?
Correct.
And is it on a
Nice.
specific letterhead?
It is. It's on the Glenn Fitzgerald and Albee letterhead that we used,
Is it signed by an attorney?
signed by Craig Albee.
And what was the purpose of this letter?
The purpose of this letter was to send Mark some materials from his case.
And does the letter identify what materials are being sent?
It does.
I'm going to refer you to item number 1 on that letter. And what does that say?
Testimony of Ed Klug.
Now, just to be clear, can you tell this jury when you wrote that letter?
It was typed on August 10th, 2007.
So based upon your knowledge of the case and all the help you had been doing, this was after the first hearing in the Jensen matter.
Yes.
It would have been after Ed Klug testified. It's at his transcript.
Yes.
Correct? I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as exhibit number 70. Do you recognize that as Ed Klug's transcript?
I do.
And does the date correspond with the letter that you sent?
There's no cover sheet.
Let me show you what
Sorry.
it's defense mark 95.
Yes.
Does it have a date of Ed Klug's transcript or the testimony?
It does.
And what date is that?
Monday, July 30th, 2007.
And is that the transcript that was included on August 10th?
Yes, it is.
And that was enclosed with the letter?
Yes.
And item number 2, what is that?
Interview of Mark Jensen on April 21st, 1999.
Okay, I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit 53.
Do-do-do-dum. Do-do-do-dum.
Can you tell me what I just handed to you exhibit 53 is?
It's a transcript of an interview of Mark Jensen that was conducted on April 21st, 1999.
So does the transcript that I handed you exhibit 53 correspond to the letter that you sent Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
And that would have been the document that you included in with that letter?
Yes.
And does it say on exhibit 53 as related to Mark Jensen's interview who that included?
Yes, it included Sergeant Paul Rasberg and Detective Heather Berg.
Thank you. Now, item number 3 on the letter, can you tell us what that is?
Exhibits introduced at the forfeiture hearing during the testimony of Rhonda Mitchell.
And so exhibits that were during that hearing?
Yes.
And do you remember what type of exhibit that was?
I don't specifically recall. I thought there was maybe a PowerPoint presentation. I don't recall exactly what was all included.
So it was some type of exhibit. It could have been a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
And then item number 4, can you tell us what that was?
Other computer information previously received.
And do you remember what that was?
Not, I don't remember.
Now, prior to July of 2007, Mr. Jensen would come into the office.
Correct.
And would he get the materials from his case when he came in?
Yes.
Is it generally when like police reports would be given to him or witness statements would be given to him?
Yes.
And after July of 2007, Mr. Jensen was no longer out of custody.
Correct.
So if Attorney Albee wanted to send or wanted Mr. Jensen to have materials, how would Mr. Jensen get them?
We would mail them to the jail.
There
Remember what
it
jail you
is.
sent them to?
Kenosha County.
And do you remember sending packages frequently, or was it pretty infrequent?
Pretty frequently after he was taken into custody.
Yeah, she can't say found
Now,
guilty.
as a legal
Taken
assistant, did
into
you request
custody.
records or jail records?
Yes.
And do you remember
Nice.
making a request of the Kenosha County Jail in the Mark Jensen case?
Yes.
Been well prepped.
Is Exhibit 91 one of those requests?
Yes.
And is the request for like prisoner transaction list as it related to Mark Jensen?
Yes.
And that would have been from July 30th to September 24th. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then there was also a request for cell transactions, or where somebody was located, both for Mr. Jensen and Mr. David Thompson.
Correct.
And did you also request a roster list of who was in the Kenosha jail on specific dates?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 92.
Come on.
I'd like to refer you to Exhibit, I think 92 I just handed you.
Yes.
That's a list of items or things that were sent to Mark Jensen.
Yes.
And does it say the dates at the top as to when those items would have been received?
It does.
And can you tell us what dates those are?
July 30th, 2007 through September 24th of 2007.
And if you look at an entry on August 11th of 2007, does it say what the jail received?
2 LRG large envelopes from Attorney Glenn Fitzgerald.
Is that consistent with the letter that you sent out on August 10th of 2007?
Yes.
And do you remember if it was more than one envelope?
With what's here and with as much as we had on the letter, yeah, I do believe it would have been 2 large envelopes.
And when you look at that exhibit, there are other entries about materials received from the law firm.
Yes.
And that's from that July 30th to just September 24th, 2007.
Correct.
It doesn't have anything after September 24th, 2007.
It does not.
Was Mr. Jensen still in custody after September 24th, 2007?
Yes.
Would you continue to send him items as requested?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 93. It's a 2-page document. These are certified records from the Kenosha County Jail.
Redirect should be interesting.
The first page of that document, can you tell me who that discusses?
Mark Jensen.
And does it say where Mark Jensen was housed during his time at the Kenosha County Jail?
Yes.
And does it say where Mr. Jensen was from August 14th to August 17th?
That's not a date on here, but I believe that he was in the same area during that time.
And does it say what area that is?
Cell block J, number 2.
And then if you turn to the second page, it talks about the cell transactions for Mr. David Thompson.
Correct.
And does it say when Mr. Thompson arrived in that same cell block J?
Yes.
And what day is that?
September 6th, 2007.
And does it say when he leaves cell block J?
It looks like he leaves on September 9th, 2007.
And then does he go back?
He does on September 10th, 2007.
It appears that at one point he's kind of out of the jail or
Yes.
out of the cell block.
Yes.
And I think that's September 10th.
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 96. We are not going to go through this all. It's a certified record from the Kenosha County Sheriff's Department.
Come on.
Ms. Blyant, I'm going to ask you to go to the August 14th, 2007 cell block J.
Yes.
And can you tell us who was in cell block J with Mr. Jensen?
Joshua Jerkowski, Mark Jensen, Miguel Mendoza, Michael Smith, Christopher Watkins, Bernard Bush, Jason Whitner, Michael Hale, and Michael Ruiz.
You don't see an Aaron Dillard in the cell block on August 14th. Do you see an Aaron Dillard there on August 14th?
I do not.
And of the individuals outside of Mr. Jensen, how many of those individuals were white men?
4.
I'm going to ask you to go to August 15th of 2007 cell block J.
Okay.
And how many individuals are listed on that day?
10, including Mark Jensen.
And do you see an Aaron
11.
Dillard on that day?
I do.
And outside of Aaron Dillard and Mark Jensen, how many other individuals are white males?
4.
I'm going to ask you to go to August 16th. Cell block J. Do you also see Aaron Dillard in cell block J on that day?
I do.
And how many other white males are in cell block J on that day, besides Mr. Dillard and Mr. Jensen?
3.
So a total of 5 with those 2. And then I'm going to ask you to go to August 17th of 2007.
Okay.
And do you see a Mr. Dillard in cell block J on that day?
No.
And how many other white males are in there on that day?
Including Mark Jensen?
Not including Mark Jensen, thank you.
5.
5. Including him, it would be 6.
Correct.
And as you look at those records, you didn't see David Thompson at that point in cell block J.
No.
I'm going to ask you to skip ahead to September 6th of 2007.
Uh-huh.
Do you see David Thompson in cell block J at that point?
I do.
Is Mr. Jensen still in cell block J?
Yes.
And then I'm going to ask you to go to September 10th.
The day of my birthday.
Do you see David Thompson in that cell block on September 10th?
No.
And then I think we had testified from the previous exhibit that he was there on the 11th. What about September 12th?
On September 12th, he is not listed.
Now, as Mr. Elby's assistant, you had an opportunity to review a lot of materials in this particular case.
I did.
And when Mr. Jensen was in custody, he wanted to receive those materials.
Yes.
And you made sure that he was provided with whatever transcripts, whatever scientific studies, whatever doctor's reports, or whatever witness statements were provided to Attorney Elby.
Correct.
It was your job to kind of copy those and then get those off to Mr. Jensen.
Correct.
I have nothing further.
Who's going to do the cross?
I am.
Go ahead, Ms. McPhail.
So the exhibit that you've just been testifying off of in front of you, what number is that?
96.
Playing catch up on the fly. Catch up on the fly.
And so these are the jail records that you asked for certified copies of, is that correct?
Correct.
Showing where inmates would be located at various times in the jail.
Correct.
Now, in terms of how the jail works, an inmate might be moved during the course of a day, correct?
I'm sure it's possible.
Obviously, inmates are moved within the jail.
Sure. Yes.
And so where an inmate is in a record depends on when that record is during the course of a day, correct?
I would assume so.
For instance, if the record is created to reflect where inmates are at like 8 a.m. in a certain cell block, then that record wouldn't reflect any changes occurring after 8 a.m.
If that's when it was printed, sure. Yes.
Good. Good redirect.
So I'm going to direct your attention to, this would be, let's see, page, this is a big document, so I'm going to try to go by page number. So I'm showing you page 6 of that document, although, again, it's a big document. So I think actually printed on the page in the upper right-hand corner would be page 4.
Correct.
But if we're looking at the pile of paperwork, it's page 6.
Okay.
And so then do you see at the top there, the top left-hand where it says run 14-August-2007?
Yes.
And then it says 6:20?
Yes.
So it appears that when we're looking at that particular date, it's reflecting what the situation was at 6:20 in the morning.
It doesn't say morning or afternoon.
If I show you a different page, and I'm just going to go to, and again, this is in the big pile, so I can't really give you a page number, but I'll ask you what this page shows. You see there that that reflects in the top left-hand corner, 17 August 2007,
Yes.
correct? And then what cell blocks are shown on that page?
Well, the first couple are cut off. The last one I can read is J. I'm sorry, H-I-N-J. And I'm assuming there's nothing listed above that.
And then if you look again in the upper left-hand corner, the time there is 22:04.
Correct.
So while the other time, the 6:20, it didn't say morning, it appears that military time is being used.
On this document, it does, yes.
And this is from the same pile of documents, correct?
It is.
Okay, so then 6:20 would be morning, and then 22:04 would be evening.
It does not say that for sure.
Okay, but is that your understanding of these records?
I would have to get clarification from the sheriff's department to make sure that the 6:20 was AM. It's not 06:20.
Good call.
22:04.
But you agree that on the page that I'm showing you, it's reflecting military time.
It is.
And is there any reason for you to think that military time would not be used through the course of all of these documents?
I don't have a reason to believe that, but I do not know for sure.
Yeah, looking over the defense. Was that good? Was that good? Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Yep. Yep.
So you agree that Aaron Dillard was housed with Mark Jensen, according to these records, at least as of August 15th, 2007?
I believe that's what it was.
Do you need to see that page again?
Please. Yes, August 15th.
And then also on August 16th of 2007, Aaron Dillard was housed with Mark Jensen,
I believe that's so, yes.
correct? Okay.
Come on.
And then I think it was your testimony that according to the record on August 17th of 2007, Aaron Dillard was no longer listed as with Mark Jensen in J Block.
Correct.
Yes.
I'm just going to show you that page.
Oh, good Lord. Prosecution is just wasting as much time as they can,
you see
hoping
that?
that.
I do.
Okay. Just take a look.
Yes, 22. She was showing me the 22:04 time.
So then just to ask you a question off that page from August 17th of 2007 appears to reflect a time of 22:04.
Correct.
And so in military time, that's 10:04 p.m.
Correct.
It's a good route that the prosecution's taking on this. At least they're not running through a bunch of pages, but they're just taking their sweet time on figuring crap out. Because they had no idea that they were going to go this direction right off the bat. If it sounds like I'm talking really funny, I went to the dentist today and got my teeth worked on. My mouth is sore, so I may not be talking properly. It's also why I'm not drinking any alcohol tonight.
And then in these records that you were shown, it did show that Mark Jensen and David Thompson were together on September 11th of 2007. Is that correct?
I believe that was one of the dates, yes.
Another 5-minute delay. Bum, 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 bum. Do, 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 do. Do, do, do.
So just to be clear about these records and the times I was showing you at the top, is there any reason for you to doubt that that is in military time?
I don't have a, I can't say that for sure.
And you worked at a law office for years, correct?
Correct.
And then police reports are almost always in military time, correct?
Most of them.
So you would certainly be familiar with that through your work at the law office.
Correct.
And again, the time changes to reflect military time at the top of some of these records, correct?
The time changes to reflect military time?
So the record I showed you showed a time of 22:04.
Correct.
And so the other time being about 6:20, I think it said at the top. You have no reason to believe that at one point the record is not in military time, and then within a day or two it is in military time.
She said she couldn't confirm.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
Redirect.
Quickly. Ms. Bly, when you requested those records, you just requested the records of the individual
Yeah, it was
locations between those
horrible.
states.
Correct.
And that's what the jail certified and sent to you.
Correct.
And the information that you provided is from those documents.
Correct.
Do you have any knowledge about how the jail works
I
as it
do not.
relates to when they do their count,
I do not.
or when they put the information from the count into the computer,
I do not.
or when they update the transfers?
I do not.
Thank you.
Anything on that, Ms. McHale?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you're excused. Thank you.
Yep. Short, sweet, good.
One.
Thank you.
Well, let's get our next one.
Microphone. Spell your first and last name for the reporter.
Lori, Lori, Ranker, Renker.
Thank you.
Ms. Ranker, did you previously go by Lori Brown?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there something that changed in your life which changed your last name?
I was married.
And can you tell the jury what you do for a living?
I'm a director of human resources for a nonprofit.
And prior to being a director of resources for a nonprofit, what did you do?
I worked at a law firm.
And what kind of work did you do for the law firm?
I was their law firm administrator.
Are you a lawyer by trade?
I am.
Did you go to law school?
I did.
And what year did you graduate law school?
1990.
Do you know a person by the name of Aaron Dillard?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you first meet Mr. Dillard?
In 2006, I needed work done on my roof, and I contracted with Mr. Dillard to do repairs, roof repairs.
Prior
Oh.
to contracting with Mr. Dillard to do roof repairs, had you met him previous to
One of
that?
his
Um,
victims.
He was an acquaintance.
Do you remember if you met him on some type of personal site?
I don't recall.
That's fair. And did he, when he, is that on? When he introduced himself to you, was it as Aaron Dillard?
It was.
And you said you contracted with him to do some type of construction work?
Yes, I had a portion of my roof where the decking was, it looked like it was rotting and the shingles were coming off. And I showed it to him and he said, I could fix that. I recommend that you have an entire roof replacement. I've got a crew of guys that are my team and this is what we do. And I could fix that. He was very personable, very knowledgeable, and instilled a lot of confidence in me that he could effectuate the repairs.
Did you contract with him to repair your roof?
I did.
Did you also have a personal relationship with Mr. Dillard?
He was a friend.
And during the time that you contracted with him to do your roof and during the time that you had this friendship, do you have opinion as to the truthfulness and honesty of Aaron Dillard?
I do.
And what is that opinion?
I feel that he was not truthful or honest with me with regards to this project. I ended up being defrauded of.
I'm objecting to this, Judge. You can offer the opinion that is appropriate, but going further than that is not.
Why don't you rephrase the question?
Asked as to what your opinion was as to his truthfulness and honesty.
I did not feel like he was truthful or honest. No,
And was that based upon both the personal and business relationship with Mr. Dillard?
it was based on the business relationship with Mr. Dillard. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. I have nothing further.
Do you have any questions from the state?
No, I don't. Thank you.
You're excused. Thank you.
There you go. Quick, easy. Good job. I like this defense. Quick and to the point. Prosecution has nothing to say. Whoa.
No, let's
Spell your last name for court.
better.
Oh, Jesus.
Spell your last name for court.
Better? Or just a little bit further down? I don't know why it's so loud on my computer.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for court?
Deborah Teagle, T-E-G-E-L.
And Ms. Teagle, did you formerly go by the name of Deborah Spears?
Yes, it was my prior name. Married.
You recently married and took the name Teagle.
Yes.
Ms. Teagle, do you know a person named Aaron Dillard?
Yes, I had a brief relationship with him.
Now, how did you meet Mr. Dillard?
I met him out one evening.
And did he introduce himself to you?
He introduced himself as Kyle Resnick to me when we first met.
He told you that his name was Kyle Wesley?
Yes.
Is the person you know, are you able to see this, Ms. Teagle? Is the person you know is Aaron Dillard depicted on here?
Yes.
And where is Mr. Dillard?
The first man on the left. Top.
Right here?
Yes.
And how did you come to know the person you understood to be Kyle Resnick was Aaron Dillard?
I started borrowing money to Kyle, Aaron, and it just didn't pan out. And I
Just think that wasn't even,
what he was saying.
not even
So
20 years
I
ago. Look at the
went
claw.
to his wallet one day, things just didn't seem right, and I got his real name, and I found out his name was Aaron Dillard, and got his address, and ran a check on him, and found out he wasn't such a good person.
So how long did you know Mr. Dillard as Kyle Resnick before you realized his proper name?
About 2 weeks.
And then did you know Mr. Dillard for a while after that period of time?
I tried to stay, once I figured out his name, I tried to stay friendly with him in hopes to return some of my money, recoup some of my money back.
Now, based on your contacts with Mr. Dillard, Ms. Teagle, did you form an opinion as to Mr. Dillard's character for truthfulness?
He has no character, and he's not a very truthful, honest person. He's a con man. He uses people and for what he can get out of them, and I don't have anything very nice to say about Kyle or Aaron.
Thank you, Ms. Teagle. No other question.
Basically,
Before we do the show.
Mr. Dillard's a piece of garbage. Untrustworthy.
Thank you.
Same exhibit, item number 3.
Spell your name for.
Oh, sorry, I just want to check the volume. I think this is about 11 minutes.
There you go.
Spell your name for the court, sir.
Frank Quintana, Quintana.
And
He's-
you're currently in the, well, you're in the Walworth County Jail to appear in this court, but you're currently in the Kenosha County Jail, is that right?
Yes.
At some point, did you meet Mark Jensen?
Yeah, in September.
And was that in the Kenosha County Jail?
Yes, it was.
Do you know what dates you were in the Kenosha County Jail in September?
It was September 7th to the 10th
And do you recall what cell block you were in at that time?
in the J block.
You were in the J block.
Yes.
And did you have occasion to have conversation with Mr. Jensen during the time you were there between September 7th and September 10th?
Yeah, I think I asked if I used his paper, Kenosha paper.
Just to read the newspaper? Did you have any more substantial conversation than that you recall?
Not really.
Did you have a chance to observe Mr. Jensen in the cell block during the period of time you were there between September 7th and September 10th?
Yes.
And what did you observe, sir?
A couple guys taking advantage of him.
And when you say you saw a couple of guys taking advantage of Mr. Jensen, could you explain that for me?
Well, there was one guy who was in cell 3, and then there was 2 guys in cell 4. And the bigger guy, Lewis Thompson, kept pretty much bullying Jensen, asking him to make a bunch of calls for him, 3-way phone calls. And then Saturday, we have little totes in your room to put your belongings. He threw his in Jensen's room and told him to fill it up with canteen or he's gonna put some blood in his mouth. He's gonna be drinking out of a straw, eating out of a straw.
No, this was Mr. Thompson said this to
Ooh.
Mr. Jensen?
Yep.
And well, tell me that last part about the canteen.
Yeah.
What do you mean by canteen?
Saturdays, you can order on Wednesday, you get canteen on Saturdays. And but Thompson kept telling Jensen he had 2 minutes to give him his commissary, or he's gonna put blood in his mouth and be eating out of a straw.
And that's something that you personally heard?
Yeah, I was there.
And do you know how many days after you arrived that you heard this threat?
That was the next day. I got there Friday night and Saturday. Canteen came.
So you think around September 8th?
Yeah.
Okay. And is Mr. Thompson depicted on defendant's exhibit number 5?
It was top right hand corner.
Is this Mr. Thompson?
Wow.
And did you see Mr. Thompson engaging in intimidation of Mr. Jensen?
From what I seen, yeah, Jensen was scared of him. Kept telling him, thought he was kidding when he asked about his canteen. And Jensen went up to Thompson a couple times and said, "You're not serious, are you?" And he said, "Effing yeah, I am. If you don't do it now, you're gonna get blood in your mouth from some eating out of a straw or something like that." And then Thompson threw his little storage container in Jensen's room, and Jensen filled it up and gave it to him.
And what kind of stuff did he fill up the bin with?
From what I see, it was just like chips and candy and stuff like that. And Thompson passed it around to some of those guys in here.
Did Mr. Jensen make any effort to fight back or do anything?
No, he looked scared to me.
And with regard to the phone calls, did it appear that Mr. Jensen was doing that willingly or at the insistence of Mr. Thompson?
Well, I noticed a couple times Thompson was getting mad that Jensen couldn't get through for making three-way calls from him. He kept trying and trying.
Was he engaging in any intimidating tactics?
Well, he kept yelling at him from what I've seen. I mean, the blocks are real small. You have one little table where everybody sits at, so pretty much see what's going on.
Did you make any effort to intervene and assist Mr. Jensen while you were there?
No, I didn't want to catch a case. I
Yeah.
didn't want to catch him in more trouble. So I told the guard when I left Monday that I believe they should get Jensen out of here because he was taking advantage of him.
Now, on Monday, where did you go on Monday?
I went back to SDX, Urban Transitional Facility.
And that's a different prison.
Probation and parole.
And, okay, so you went to a probation and parole facility. And when you were taken out, you had some conversation with the guards?
Yeah, I don't remember what guard it was, but I told him I felt that he should get Jensen out of here because taking advantage of him. A couple guys were pretty much Thompson was the leader of them.
Now, did you become friends with Mr. Jensen?
No, I maybe asked him if I could. I believe I asked him to use the classified out of the paper if I could read it. That's about all I talked to him in September.
And why is it that you felt you should say something?
I don't know, because I thought it was BS to get taken advantage because there's a lot of that going on in jail. If you can't defend yourself, they're going to take your belongings. That's how it is in there.
Did you see anybody else giving Mr. Jensen a hard time?
I think Thompson, Sully was kind of egging Thompson on too about going to get some commissary.
Mr. Quintana, well, it appears.
So Thompson was the large black gentleman from yesterday that testified about the calling to have the lead witness in the case sort of removed from the situation, but basically he was just scamming money. So that was the one that apparently has turned his life around and is now working in HR or something like that. Runs his own personal businesses. I was impressed that he's moved on, but back at this point in time, he wasn't doing so hot.
Because you come to us from the jail, you've been convicted of a crime before. Is that right?
Yes.
And how many times?
Maybe nine times, maybe more. I don't know for sure.
Okay. And now, did you ever see Mr. Jensen again after September?
I came back to jail in December. We're in I block together.
Did Mr. Jensen remember you?
No, I came up to him and then asked him for the paper because he had the commercial newspaper. And I told him that I remembered him back in September when they were taking advantage of him back then. And we talked a little bit, and he asked me if I'd come testify what I seen in September, and I said, that's fine. And nothing to lie about it. I told him exactly what happened.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Quintana. The prosecution may have some questions for you.
Mr. Quintana, did you overhear any specific conversations between Mark Jensen and David Thompson about a problem witness for Mark Jensen?
What?
A problem witness for Mark Jensen?
No, what I observed was about the phone calls and Thompson putting his empty coat in there to get Jensen's canteen.
Where was your cell in relation to Mark Jensen's cell?
That was the third cell right next to Thompson's, and Jensen's was his last cell, number 6.
Now, did you ever see Mark Jensen and David Thompson either standing or sitting against the back wall and talking among themselves?
I seen him when he gave him his commissary, and I think Thompson came back and tried to give him, I believe he gave him a couple of the bags of chips back or something. I don't know why, but.
So, and listen to the question carefully, please. Did you see David Thompson and Mark Jensen either sitting or standing against the back wall and talking among themselves?
No, I've never seen it.
You never saw that happen?
No, I seen him talking by the telephones and by the TV.
So you did see them talking to each other, but it wasn't by the back wall?
Yeah.
It was by the television set?
Yeah, because Jensen kept asking him if he was serious about 2 minutes to give his canteen to him or not.
But, okay, that was one conversation.
Yeah.
Were there any other conversations that you saw or heard that occurred between David Thompson and Mark Jensen?
Maybe by the phones when he was having Jensen make 3-way calls from it.
Now, that conversation that occurred between David Thompson and Mark Jensen about the in your commissary thing?
He's
did that
still
occur
getting
earlier on,
mad.
Or was that later in the time that they were staying there?
It was sometime Saturday, I don't know exactly.
Sometime on Saturday?
Yeah.
And you had been in that cell block since Friday?
I think Friday night I got there.
So it was Friday night that you got there, so it was Saturday sometime during the day. It was the first full day that you were there
Yeah.
that you saw this conversation. Now, you were there then Sunday and Monday also, correct?
I left Monday morning.
Oh, so you left Monday morning. So you were only there one day after that, and that was Sunday. Now, did you see any conversation that occurred between Mark Jensen and David Thompson on Sunday?
Maybe around the phones. I mean, I stayed in my room, which my room was right across from the phone, so
Did you hear what they were talking about on
No,
that
I
Sunday? But you did see them talking around the phone.
yeah, I think it was for 3-way calls. And Mark had told him, I heard Mark telling him that he tried to get a hold of whoever and he couldn't get through or something.
Did you ever hear David Thompson and Mark Jensen talking about a witness that was a problem for Mark Jensen?
No, I never heard that.
Did you ever hear the name Ed Clue while you were in that cell block with Mark Jensen?
No.
Did Mark Jensen ever talk to you about his case while you were in that cell block with Mark Jensen?
No.
Did you ever hear Mark Jensen talking to anybody else about his case while you were in that cell block with Mark Jensen?
No, not really. No.
Did you see Mark Jensen reading stuff about his case while he was in the cell block?
I might have seen him going through his papers when I went. His cell was back by the windows. When I walked by the windows, he might have been going through his court case.
Well, so you did see him doing
I've
that?
seen in his cell. I believe I seen him a couple times reading his court case.
Did you ever see him talking to anybody else when he was going through his paperwork?
Not that I seen. No.
Did you ever see him show his paperwork to anybody else while you were in that cell block?
No, I was there. No.
Thank you for the questions.
Nothing further. Mr. President.
See you bye.
Spell your name.
Judge, we would need a break at this point. We don't have an additional witness here. We have a longer video, but it would take up more.
Are you moving in 104?
I'm going to, yes, Judge.
All right.
There's 2 more videos. There's 1 more video on that exhibit,
Oh, I'm sorry then.
but it's a longer video, so I don't think.
We have a legal issue that we still have to discuss, so we're going to do that now.
All right.
And then we don't.
Get the jury out of there, see what the legal issue is.
The jury is outside of the courtroom. We, I believe, have a motion by the defense that was made before the testimony started for the defense. So you can make your motion, Ms. Krause.
Judge, at the
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Peer.
it's fine. She's the one who said there's a motion.
I swear to God, she said the motion. So
You're right.
all right. Are you going to make the motion?
I am. Yeah.
All right.
This is at the conclusion of the state's case. The defense moves to dismiss insufficient evidence, insufficient credible evidence pointing towards establishing that Mark Jensen committed first-degree intentional homicide.
There you go.
I am going to quote as to what the motion is. It's a motion to dismiss at close of the state's case. It says, motion must be denied if, considering the state's evidence in the most favorable light, the evidence adduced, believed, or rationally considered is sufficient to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So I have to give the state the most favorable light here. And I do have, for the record, 3 notepads already full. We had 38 witnesses for the state. And we will start out with the first witness in this case was Ruth Vorval, Vorvald.
Vorwald, Your Honor, Vorwald.
Thank you. She knew Julie Jensen. She indicated on December 3rd, 1998, she was driving north. She saw Mark Jensen on that day on Lakeshore Drive. Mark waved. It was in the middle of the morning, and she thought it was kind of unusual because Mark worked in Racine. We had Sharon Krause. She testified. She saw Mark on December 3rd, 1998. Indicated that Mark said to her that Julie was gone, showed no emotions. We then had Teresa DeFazio, who testified under oath. She indicated, Julie said, I cannot use the computer. She would show up every Wednesday to help at the school. There was a statement that Julie made that my husband is going to kill me. She also indicated, she told Ms. DeFazio she found a list of drugs, issues of overdose. She also indicated that her husband, Mark, was on the computer off and on, looking up areas. She also indicated, she said that Mark would make it look like a suicide. Carrie Ashley indicated she called Julie December 2nd, 1998. Mark Jensen answered. Mark said Julie was sick in bed. She also indicated she saw Julie's items in the garbage. She also indicated she saw Kelly Labonte in the house within a month. Eric Shore, the young man, testified in December of 1998. He heard David Jensen, the older boy, indicate information about his mother's health, indicated he was very concerned, said his mother was sick. She had heavy breathing. For the record, we talked about the actual breathing that was being mentioned under oath, and that his dad would not take her to the hospital. He also indicated he observed Kelly Labonte in the residence within a very short period of time.
Yeah.
Laura Shore, that is the mother of Eric, indicated that she had information that Julie was sick. Angelina Martinelli indicated Julie was an excellent mother. She had the younger Jensen boy in preschool. Joseph Mangi, who at that time was principal of Bradford High School. Julie applied for a job there, sent the resume. They were going to hire her. And sometime December 1st or 2nd, he called Mr. Julie to tell her that she was going to be accepted for the job. And a male answered, and he said that was Mark Jensen. And the statement by Mark Jensen was, Julie's asleep. She'll be asleep for a long time. And there was a laugh. Kimberly Noble, she indicated that Julie was a happy person. She was a good mother. We had Exhibit 9. It was a tape of Thaddeus Wojcik, W-O-J-T. He talked about conversations that he had with Julie. She was very upset over things.
Okay, you're going to go through every single one of the witnesses. Give me a breakdown. I got you.
Drinking. They're at the hotel.
Yes.
The original police.
He's going to deny the motion.
Yourself in the bedroom. The porno picture. Computer. Yeah. Rosemary, the broker, she was engaged to her. No other.
Oh.
He arrived responded from, and he did the interview of Mr. Jensen. That was what's the friend. We've been having Detective Rasberg. Julie did not get out of bed December.
Okay.
They also have information.
All right, not important.
And they have searches that were done on his home computer from the Jensen residence as to 5 a.m. or whatever. They're all searches during the early mornings of the hour. Toxic alcohol, ethanol, glycol, poison websites. Julie Jensen. There's a search for
They've
about
yet
the
to
information
prove
Ed
that it
Klug
was
talked
him.
about. And she's the one that said, "Oh my God, he killed her." Glycol. We had a video of Joan Scully,
Good Lord.
January 21st.
I've given us a breakdown of what
phone
we already
records.
saw.
We got Mr. Jensen and Mr. Thompson and Mr. Thompson's ex-wife or his mother of his child talking about money being transferred, 500, 575, and something being taken care of. And I can't tell you what it's for, but I'll tell you later. So Mr. Jensen's talking about Ed Klug and the sitting and his kidnapping with Mr. Thompson, his wife, and his mother. And they're all recorded. David Ellis, obviously very limited information. He was the investigator that the Jensens had hired, but they canceled it. Gretchen Rosecki, the attorney for Mr. Dillard, talked about the letter that she sent regarding her client. Dr. Mary Malin, the medical examiner for Kenosha County. She retired November 2020. Pretty impressive resume.
Yeah.
She was a medical examiner in February 2005, left in 2008, went to Tampa, Florida. She's done 4,000 autopsies. She didn't perform this autopsy, but she reviewed numerous records, and both sides grilled her of what she reviewed, whether it was a medical record, a police report, photos, autopsy, transcripts. She talked about what her opinion is, and she was pretty clear, even after the cross that Mr. Perry did.
Nah.
She was pretty solid in her opinion.
Yeah.
She talked about the phases of poisoning and how they would start, whether it's
Yeah.
or death, and the manner of death is homicide. She talked to bruising. Mr. Jensen in not a good position. I got lots of witnesses that put Mr. Jensen in not a good position. So I think the evidence, considered most likely in the state's light, there's sufficient evidence here to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt at this point. So the motion is denied. Okay.
Judge, I have one more issue. We have a transcript from Marvin Oakler that we're going to play.
Is he a witness?
He is a witness.
All right. What number is he?
Marvin Oakler.
Thank you. It says deceased transcript.
Yes. So we have generally agreed on all parts that should or should not be played, except for as it relates to him. The prosecution doesn't want us to play the part where Marvin Oakler talks about the Griffins. I have no objection to that. I'll make sure that that's taken out. But they also object to Marvin Oakler talking about his experience as a pastor at funerals. I think that's fair game based upon all the testimony of the prosecution's witnesses about Mr. Jensen's behavior at the funeral.
How long is the portion about the pastor talking about funerals?
Maybe 2 minutes.
I'm going to let it in. It's been an issue brought up by the state's witnesses that Mr. Jensen did.
There you go.
Like he was grieving. There's numerous.
Good job, Judge.
So it's 2 minutes. We'll let it in. And you're not going to play the portion.
That they object to us to the Jensen family. No, I don't have any issue of getting that redacted.
When do you plan to play your videos tomorrow?
Because we have 2 doctors testifying in the mornings, not experts, but doctors, the afternoon.
All right.
So I would just request that the defense send me the new transcript of what it should look like, and then I can follow along with that.
Do you have a transcript typed up of the video?
I have his prepared transcript, and then I will get the video prepared. I didn't prepare it because we had to resolve this issue.
We've just been highlighting the transcript, and that's completely sufficient. I just want to be able to follow along.
Get her the transcript. Which doctors are you going to have tomorrow?
The plan is to have Dr. Paul DeFazio and then Dr. Richard Borman.
All right. Let me,
Oh,
in the morning. And are they going to take up all of the morning, or are we going to go in the afternoon with them?
I'm hoping it's just the morning, but we'll see.
Okay. Anything else from the state? No, Your Honor. Anything else from the defense?
No,
Right,
thank
the
you.
jury has left, right? They're gone? Okay. See you tomorrow, 8:30. We'll give the defender.
there we go. So that is all for today on that one. Lord Almighty, feel my temperature rise. But yeah, I think that's good for today. Do it. Hopefully I can speed through it again tomorrow. That'd be wonderful. I hope that all of you who hit that like button, just reach down there, hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. If you get a chance, check out the link tree. I've got links over there to Rumble. Feel free to go over there and subscribe to Rumble. I'm just trying to get that booger up so I can do a multi-stream from 2 different places. That'd be awesome. That's good. You just spent 3 hours shoveling snow. Rabbit, that's wonderful. Exercise is wonderful. Shoveling snow sucks, though. I will say. That's one thing I do not miss about living in a northern state was the amount of snow. A ship I worked on, this would have probably been around 98. I think that was it. Something like that. But yeah, shoveling snow off of a ship in Baltimore. It was a lot of snow. Rabbit, I can't help you with the shoveling of the snow. I really can't. I wish I could. Keep your hands warm. Keep your toes warm. Keep your body warm. Be careful. Really, be careful. We don't like it whenever Rabbit's not doing well. Nobody here does. We like having Rabbit around. Brings so much joy to all of these folks in my chat. And so I think I'm going to call it out a night. Well, thank you, Rabbit. I appreciate it. I'll try to talk more throughout the trial. No, I won't do that. that would get really annoying for people if all I did was talk throughout the trial. And my streams would go for hours and hours, which I wouldn't object to do, but other people might object if I did nothing but yammer throughout the whole thing. Every so often I'll get a little worked up and say something, but overall, I don't know. Something seems fishy. Rabbit knows it. A lot of these other folks watching this know it. It's something doesn't seem right. But do I think he'll go back into jail? I think there's a 50% chance that he does. That's about all I can give you on that. Oh man, my teeth hurt. Not really my teeth. It's mainly my jaw. I'm having to bite down constantly. So I do appreciate everybody for coming on, saying hi. Thank you, Cool Frog, for dropping by, and everybody else. It's been a good week, and it's only Tuesday, so it can only get better. So everybody have a wonderful night, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Exotica.